So we'll just like go towards the next item, which is approval of the agenda. Alrighty. So yeah, so we'll just be doing the approval of the agenda. So we have the agenda in front of us. So if anyone likes to move for this motion.
Mr. Mahako, I can move.
All right, very good. And do I have anyone who'd like to second for that?
Councilor Bajaj, I'll second.
All right, sounds good. Are there any objections to any of this? All right, hearing as there are none, we'll just count it that it has passed. So the next part is the approval of the minutes. So we have the link to the minutes. So same thing again. Does anyone like to move for this?
Councilor Mahako, I can move.
All right, sounds good. And anyone like to second for it?
Councilor Chen, I can second.
Sounds good. And are there any objections to the previous council meetings minutes? Right, sounds like there are none, so we'll count it as passed. So
Kevin,
next part.
Kevin, there's a turning point vote for the approval of the agenda.
Oh, there is? Apologies. Okay. All right. Sounds good. So I guess we have to send out the turning point link for that then.
So everyone should be logged in, except for the two people who just messaged me that are having a hard time finding it. I will be right with you. But it looks like people are already voting. I've got 34 people logged in, 28 people have already voted. So we'll just give everyone a couple of seconds to do that. And then, all right. I got 3 people who are struggling with Turning Point. Everyone should have got an email with their Turning Point instructions for login. So I used your Western USC emails to set you up. So just double check your spam if you haven't found it. And then I will throw the link in the, Shanika, go ahead.
I have my Turning Point account from last year, but it was through my UWO email. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Throw the link to log in the chat here if you can't remember where that is.
Quick question, was there attendance in Turning Point or did I just miss that too?
Don't worry about it. I will get attendance from once people are voting. I'll know who's here and who's not.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the polls on the approval of the agenda. There's still a couple people who haven't voted, but we'll keep moving. And if you have any other questions, concerns, shoot me a message, and we'll try to get you sorted out. Kevin, you're good to continue.
All right, well, sounds good. Now we'll move on to the next part, which is approving the minutes. So we originally had Councilor President Mao Kuhl and Councilor Chen move and second. So I'm assuming we're going to be sending out the Turning Point voting again for that, correct, Melissa?
Sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself.
No worries.
No, so as long as the minutes, as no one objects to the minutes, you're good to go.
All right, sounds good. All right, so next part is the presentations, which there are none. So now move on to next action, next part, which is for action. So our very first item is the election of counselors to the Transport Advocacy Working Group. So motion 1, so be it resolved that council elect 4 members to the Transport Advocacy Working Group, and it has been moved by the Huron President Chasmar. And do I have anyone like to second for that?
Councillor Chen, I can second.
Right, sounds good. So correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, we just do nominations from this point?
So at this point, President Chasmar can speak to the motion, as can Councillor Chen, and then we would look for nominations from the floor.
All right, sounds good. So if President Chasmar or Councillor Chen like to speak upon this, please go ahead.
I think that this motion more or less speaks for itself, and I really have nothing to add.
All right. Sounds like that's really good. So now we'll move on to the nominations. So if anyone would like to nominate themselves or nominate someone else to this, will just message us and we can go from there.
Point of inquiry, is like the proposer of the motion automatically on the working group, or is it, do they have to be nominated as well?
So wait, can you repeat your question? Apologies.
No, sorry, my bad. Are like the movers of the motion on the working group, or is it separate?
I would assume it's separate. So if you like still move, but you still want to be part of the working group, just raise your hand and I'll note you down as one of the nominees. All right. So yeah, so you have to be nominated. So like I'm assuming that wait, apologies. All right, so we have 4 nominees for the yeah, so sounds good. So I see that people are raising their hands. I'm assuming you guys want to nominate yourselves, or are you wanting to nominate someone else?
I'm looking to nominate someone else.
Okay, cool. Who would like to nominate?
I would like to nominate Councillor Jung.
All right, and does Councillor Jung accept that nomination?
I'll accept.
All right, sounds good. And Councillor Chen, would you like to nominate or self-nominate?
I would like to nominate myself.
Sounds good. And President Chasmar, would you like to nominate or self-nominate?
I'd like to nominate myself as well.
Sounds good. And Councillor Zhu, would you like to nominate yourself or someone else?
Oh, sorry about that. My
No worries.
Zoom's a little laggy. Self-nomination, please.
Sounds good. Any other hands for nominations? Alrighty. Seeing as unless President Chasmar, that is an additional hand for another nomination, because I still see your hand up.
That is not. Apologies.
Oh, no worries. All right. So seeing as there are none, currently there are 4 nominees for the 4 positions. Maybe just to give a quick introduction for all of them, that they give a quick introduction for each other. So just in the order that we have listed on the agenda, we have Councillor Chen, President Chasmar, Councillor Zhu, and then Councillor Zhang. So maybe give a quick introduction of yourselves and why you want to be part of this group. So maybe we can begin with Councillor Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to everyone else. Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan. I'm in social science, going to my 3rd year. And I guess I have a few reasons about why I want to be part of this working group, but mainly it's because of my past experience, specifically in this area. Ever since first year, I've been a member of the Western Transport Advocacy Association, and in that time, I've developed an understanding of the local issues surrounding transport in Western and the players within the transportation industry and local government, as well as in general broad student interests and general groups that must be reflected when it comes to any sort of advocacy on transport justice and making sure that we're improving transport for everyone in the school. So I have experience developing those advocacy priorities so I can work directly with Eunice and President Chasmar to get the initiative off the ground and to use my pre-existing knowledge to connect with the right students on campus. But secondly, it's also a personal interest of mine. I'm still clinging on to my childhood interest of buses and public transport. And I don't think anyone likes being stuck on the 102 at 9 a.m. packed like sardines heading to Natsai as well. So I guess I have a personal interest and a hobby in making sure public transport gets better. And so I'm looking forward to tying together my role as counselor and my past experience to sit on this committee. And I would appreciate being selected on it. So I thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much for that. So now we'll move on to President Chasmar.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Matthew Chasmar. I'm the president at the Huron Students' Council this year. And as a lot of you have probably already realized, this is a topic that is important to me. It's something that I have pursued for the past few years as part of the Western Transport Advocacy Association, like Ethan. It's something that I pursued last time I had a term on council, and it's something that I fully intend to pursue this time that I have on council by creating this working group. And so having done the work so far to create this working group and get it set up, I'm now hoping to run for this position to get it set up further, really get it working, get some good work done, and continue to advocate on this issue because it is one that I care about. And it's also one that's important to students and that really affects students' lives, especially now as we're transitioning back to a at least partially in-person campus. And all these topics are going to be back on the agenda after a very short period of time off it. And I think it's important that there are people in the USC looking at these topics and looking at student interest in relation to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to Councillor Zhu.
Hey guys, I'm Eric Xu. I'm representing the social science faculty here, and I'm going into second year economics. I guess I want to speak a little bit as to why I'm interested in joining this group. I think firstly, transportation is just a big issue for students, right? And it's something that I'd like my voice to be represented on as USC counselor, whether that be like full LTC buses or just difficulty traveling from other cities to London for school. I think it's definitely something that students spend a lot of their time worrying about, right? And although it's not an issue that I directly ran on within my campaign, I think it's an issue that's also tied up with some other priorities in my campaign, right? Like, for example, lower income students who might not be able to afford a car as personal transportation still deserve ways to get around our city, right? Which also makes this an affordability issue in many ways. I think if we can improve transportation in London, we allow people to get around better and access services that are important to them. Finally, I think this is also kind of a personal interest. I am a bit of an urban planning geek. I did an entire report in grade 12 where I would just sit downtown for hours on end and ask people questions about what they thought about urbanization. I regularly play things such as city skylines for fun. So I just build cities in my computer for fun if you think that's an interesting use of your time. And I do want to take some classes in that area this year. So it's also a little bit of a personal passion project of mine, I guess. So I'd appreciate your support and confidence in joining this committee.
All right, thank you very much. And finally, we'll go on to Councillor Joan.
Hi guys, I'm Jenny. I'm from the music faculty. I'm going into my third year of violin performance. Thank you, Lauren, for the nomination. I'm really excited about this working group and the possibility to contribute to it. I think the music faculty is in a really unique position in the necessity for this group, in the sense that we have a lot of stupid hours, whether that's before sunrise or well after sunset. And I know Lauren and I both, as early as first year, we've been at the school from like 8 a.m. to like well past midnight because of shows or rehearsals or practicing or anything like that. So I think as an advocate for my faculty, I think it'd be really useful to have my input in this discussion for this group. I agree that this is a problem that affects all the faces that I've been advocating for, like low income and accessibility and all that stuff. So I would really appreciate the opportunity. And though I do not build cities on my computer like Councillor Zhu, the passion and the drive is certainly there. So I would really appreciate your support in this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So now that wraps up the nomination speeches. So now we'll move on to a quick vote. Since there are 4 councillors who've nominated and there's 4 openings, we'll simply just do a vote of confidence. So we'll now be sending out a vote on Turning Point for that. And based on that, we'll see if the council has confidence in these 4 nominees.
Just waiting on 4 more people to vote.
No worries.
To answer the question I just got in the chat, yes, if you vote for this motion, if you vote in favor of this motion, it's the same as voting for the candidates. Just waiting on 1 more person. Maybe just everyone quickly double check that your vote went through. Okay, the polls are closed and the motion carries 98% in favor with 2% abstaining.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Melissa. All right, so now we'll move on to the next part of the 4 action, which is the executive reports, and that's also motion number 2. So motion number 2 is motion to endorse the executive roadmap and priorities. So be it resolved that council endorse the USC executive's roadmap and priorities as an indication of students' desires for action on each of the outlined priorities. It has been already moved by President Fagliani, and do I have a seconder for this?
Councillor Bajaj, I'll second.
Sounds good. And would either Councillor Bajaj or President Fagliani like to speak upon this motion?
I would love to, Kevin. Thank you. First of all, just want to start off by saying it's really nice to see you all, and I'm glad that we are, having our second meeting of our term. I'm hoping that maybe we can all meet in person soon enough, but really excited for this productive meeting. With respect to this particular motion, to provide you all with a little bit of context, after all of the VPs and the president come into their roles, we spent some time as a group working together to figure out what our priorities as a team are going to be. And we do that by amalgamating all of our platforms, all of our applications if they were a hired VP, interview notes and so forth. We all sit in a round table and kind of see what the synergies are. And as a result of those conversations, we've come up with 10 priorities that we hope to focus on for the year. Those 10 priorities are all listed in the table of contents of the July executive roadmap tracking document that we sent to everyone. So really quickly, what they are is student experience, student development, EDI, sexual and gender-based violence prevention and response, sustainability, academic experience and quality of education, accessibility, and I almost gave you all the middle finger, I'm so sorry. Accessibility and affordability of education, student engagement and community building, peer support, health and wellness, and then finally, transparency and accountability. Callista also sent them in the chat, so thank you so much, Callista. Usually these all come to council in October once the executive have already started their work and begun their advocacy and programming. We wanted to bring it to you 4 months early because we really want you all to be involved and we want to be transparent and accountable to you all. And essentially the reason why we bring it to council to be endorsed is because it gives the priorities weight. When we go to stakeholders, whether they're university or external stakeholders, and we say, this is what's important to our council and our student body, it's really, really helpful for these stakeholders to know that these are not unilateral ideals that are just held by the executive, but goals and priorities that are shared by the entire student body. So that's why we're bringing them forward. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the priorities that we have selected as a group, I'd be more than happy to address them. But that is kind of the reason why we're bringing this motion forward and what our 10 priorities for the year are going to be.
All right, thank you very much. Councilor Bajaj, do you have anything that you'd like to add on?
No, I think President Fagarani handled it all. Still getting used to the last names thing.
No worries, but yeah, sounds good. All right, so we'll now move on to the question period of this motion. So anyone would like to ask a question to either the mover or the seconder, please raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Seems like there are no questions, which is all right. So now we'll move on to the debate portion. So if anyone would like to speak in favor or against the motion, once again, please raise your hand. And now it's your time to speak. All right, once again, no one's raising their hand, which is all right. So we'll now move on to the voting period for this motion. So we'll be on turning point and please vote and we'll see what the results are.
I need 4 more people to vote. Okay, the polls are closed and the motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the next item for the executive reports, which is motion number 3. So be it resolved that council accept the executive reports for July 2021. And that's already moved by President Fakarani. If anyone likes to second for that.
Councilor Miller.
All right, sounds good, Councilor Miller. And do any of you want to speak upon the motion?
I would love to again. So a couple context pieces for council, because this is the first executive report you all will be accepting from, or hopefully accepting from our executive, is that first and foremost, you'll notice that the language is that you are accepting the executive reports. This essentially means that if you pass the motion, that you have read and are okay with the updates that we have provided. And the purpose of like our question and debate period here is so that you're able to ask your questions and ensure that the work we as an executive are doing are reflecting the needs of your constituents. So please make sure you're reading the reports and asking questions. You should always get the reports via email, either the Friday or the Wednesday before council. And for summer council, the reports come in the form of just like a PDF document. But starting in September, you will receive a PDF document, but then the executives will also have a slide deck that we will walk you through to give a little bit more detail on some of the, I guess, important files that we're working on. And I also want to ask you, Kevin, would it be all right with you if I let each exec speak for 2 minutes on some of the most important things in that report that they shared?
Yes, for sure. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll go first. I'm not going to reiterate anything that is already in the PDF, but I'll just identify some things that aren't in the PDF and things that have happened in the time that has elapsed since the report went out. First and foremost, I've sent you all a COVID update in terms of what fall on campus is going to look like. That is also on the Facebook group. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about that, let me know. I spoke to Matt Mills, the director in charge of that file at Western, and he said that this is no longer like confidential information. So feel free to share this with your constituents, because I know students have been asking a lot of questions about what the fall is going to look like. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the sustainability policy paper. So Eunice and I, and I'm pointing to her, but you can't tell. Eunice and I are working on the USC's first ever environmental sustainability policy paper, and it's gonna come to council in the fall. But we want our councillors to be a lot more engaged in our advocacy this year. Councillors have always expressed interest, but those opportunities haven't always presented themselves. So we want to open this this policy paper up to you folks. And if any of you are interested in contributing as a researcher, as a writer, as a consultant, please reach out to me no later than Wednesday, and we would be more than happy to have you involved. Also, with respect to the prayer space that I identified in that report, there's going to be a bit of a delay in terms of most UCC renovations. There's a lot of labor and capital shortages. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like a lot of those spaces are going to open up by September, but they will be open during the school year at some point, and I'll provide you with more updates once our contractors and Western are able to provide that to us. Also, to reiterate something Kevin sent out via email, there will be an August council meeting this year. When we as a group were reviewing councillor feedback from last year, one of the biggest things was councillors wish that there were more meetings and more opportunities to come together as a group. So we are going to have this August council meeting. And just to be aware, we as a group are also talking about ways we can make council more productive and engaging for you all. So there might be some changes to the council structure and layout coming in the coming months. I also want to let you know with respect to the lives that were taken in Hyde Park, the Islamophobic incident. We have been working with Western to plan a virtual memorial service for the campus community, and it's going to be on July 29th, that's a Thursday, from 1 to 2 p.m., specifically for Medea Salman and Salman Afzal. Also, Western has created some scholarships in their name. I believe they're for the engineering faculty specifically. And I also want to mention that we're doing a lot of hiring at the USC right now. Specifically, I'm going to be hiring for Team USC, which is our kind of ambassador team. I'll let all the other execs speak to their hiring momentarily. So please make sure you're sharing those opportunities with students. They're all paid opportunities. Unless they're volunteer positions, of course, and that will all be indicated on our website. So please be sure to share that with students. And the last thing I want to mention, and I hope this puts a smile on all of your faces, and I should have mentioned it a little bit earlier when Sarah Emily mentioned she's excited to go to the Spoke again, but our friend Rick McGee is double vaxxed, and he is very excited to be performing in the fall again. So see you all at Rick's night come fall. And I will pass it to Ziana to provide her updates.
Awesome, thank you, Samir. So a few things that I'm going to highlight.
My bad.
All right, I think we're good to go. Updates on administrative hiring. Most of you will have seen this by now, but Western has completed hiring for the new AVP EDI position. So some context for how this fits into the administrative structure. This individual will be reporting directly to President Alan Shepard, and they'll be supported by an advisory council of industry experts, as well as the EDI Action Network, which is a group of Western community members doing equity-oriented work in their respective constituencies. And this is a body that I will be sitting on along with the USC's ESS coordinator to make sure that there's a student perspective involved in this work. There's also ongoing hiring within the wellness and well-being portfolio. So this department is in the process of recruiting a lead physician for student health services, a clinic director for the psychological services clinic, and counselors for the mental health team. As per recommendations in our mental health policy paper produced last year, the USC has been emphasizing the importance of having diverse lived experiences in our mental health counselors, which the Director of Wellness and Wellbeing has committed to prioritizing in her hiring searches. An LGBTQ2S+ identifying counselor who is also experienced with ASL was just hired, and they are working on hiring and recruitment for both a Black counselor and an Indigenous counselor. Regarding the ongoing Weldon renovations, the renovation is still in progress, and I'm working closely with the Associate Chief Librarian Academic to make sure we're providing student-facing recommendations on the renovations and furniture selections. They are targeting a mid-October reopening for access to Weldon, and Weldon will be offering print access to course readings, which was not the case last year, but to access them, students will just have to pick up the books from another library on campus like Taylor. Regarding remote proctoring updates, I attend bi-weekly remote proctoring student protection subcommittee meetings to ensure that Proctorio, which will be the primary remote proctoring vendor for this year, is set up to meet student needs. So the plan right now is for the software to be finalized and integrated over the summer to be ready for the fall. Although we anticipate a significant reduction in the use of remote proctoring as a mechanism for assessment, with the majority of course delivery returning to in-person. If anyone has any concerns about accessibility, please reach out to Accessible Education in order to organize that, and feel free to pass that on to your constituents as well. An update on demographic data collection within the university. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the relevant motion. But the anti-racism advisors to the president have been working on putting together a campus-wide demographic data collection pilot project. I just wanted to speak quickly to the privacy piece, as we know that this is important to the student body as this data is collected. As part of this project, there is work being done on a data governance policy so that it's clear how demographic data will be used, collected, stored, and communicated for consent purposes. So while details about the rollout have not yet been confirmed, Samir and I will continue to work closely with the anti-racism advisors as the project progresses. And then I'm going to speak to some upcoming projects from the University Affairs portfolio. My portfolio will be introducing a student appeals support center this fall in order to provide students who are dealing with academic appeals with a confidential peer-to-peer support service from student volunteers. We're going to be trained extensively in Western University's academic policy as well as the appeals process. And we're really looking forward to offering the service to students this year. We know, especially with the transition online last year, there was a need for a service like this to help students navigate the nuances of the appeals process, whether that be for academic offense charges, grade appeals, or equity appeals relating to academic matters. There will be hiring for this team of volunteers in August, so do keep an eye out for that. And then in the coming months, the University Affairs portfolio will be working on a few different policy papers, including our very first racialized and religious students policy paper, as well as a policy paper on academic support services such as academic advising. I've spoken to a few of you counselors who are interested in being involved in those processes, but if you would like to be involved in that in those papers or in that advocacy work, please feel free to shoot me a message. We will be conducting consultation and student feedback for both advocacy projects, so you can expect to hear more about that as the progress continues. And happy to take any questions once the executive is finished delivering their updates, and I'll pass it to you, Eunice.
Oh. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to keep my updates pretty high level, but the more specific comments and updates are in the document. So first, municipally, it's been pretty quiet since it is the summer, and so council has just been a little bit more slow, but the main focus so far has been on safe cities, which is sexual and gender-based violence, awareness and prevention and response. So we are trying to finish up a lot of work before the fall when it comes to developing educational campaigns around the city, training, looking at bar strategies, and then also raising awareness. So a lot of that work we want to be done prior to the fall before students come back. So that's been a big focus there. In terms of provincial and with USA, we had our strategic planning conference about like 3 weeks ago now. And as the USC, we brought forth 3 main priorities, which were racial equity, affordability, and sexual and gender-based violence prevention and response. And all of those priorities have been adopted as USA priorities, along with sustainability, mental health, students with disabilities. So we are now kind of in the process of figuring out the recommendations that we want to prioritize for the year. And so once all of that is figured out, then we'll kind of have our plans for the year in terms of like advocacy and meetings and campaigns and all of that. And then we also decided to have priorities for election purposes too, since there's a chance of an election being called at some point. So for elections, we have student financial aid, comprehensive student mental health care, sustainable funding models when it comes to like institutions, environmental sustainability, and then post-COVID-19 recovery. So a lot of those kind of overlap with our like advocacy priorities, but in terms of the election priorities, those are more for like platform influencing. And then we also will be obviously having the Fall General Assembly this fall. So the papers that we've decided to have for this Fall General Assembly are the Indigenous Students paper, which has been, like they've been working on it for the past like year. So we'll be bringing that to the Fall GA this fall. And then we also will have the Responding to COVID-19 paper, Accountability and System Vision, and then Student Mobility and Credit Transfer. So yeah, if anybody has like any questions about that, let me know. And then in terms of UCrew, we're also figuring out our strategic priorities for the year, and those are being finalized and will be finalized by the end of the month. But so far, we've just been doing some further research and then also just like seeing the issues that have been coming up. So a lot of like the pressing issues are like international students, like in terms of border regulations and things like that, student financial aid, mental health supports, student employment. So yeah, we're just basically just kind of looking at everyone's priorities and figuring out the direction that we want to go for the year. And then also in terms of platform development also, since there's just buzz of the election coming soon. And then lastly, I'm also hiring another AVP External Affairs. So if you know anyone that would be interested, spread the word. And yeah, those are my updates.
Thank you, Eunice. We're working on the meeting synchronizing. Really quickly, so Maddie is away today, but I'll be providing her updates. Maddie, again, for everyone, is our amazing VP Student Support and Programming. The first thing I'll mention is she's doing a lot of hiring right now. Each and every single peer program and like service under peer support is hiring, whether it's the Allyship Network, the International Student Support Committee, Pride Western, Theater Western, USC Accessibility, Charity, Public Arts, the list goes on. So if folks are interested, send them the link to westernusc.ca and you just have to click on your opportunities. That's also where you can find the applications for Team USC when they come out. That's where you can find the applications for Eunice's paid AVP position and Ziana's paid AVP position as well. So please make sure you're sharing that with students. There's a lot of great opportunities for students to get involved. That's the first thing I'll mention. Eunice, Maddie and I have been super duper busy these past couple of weeks planning for O Week and homecoming. I'm very excited because it's looking like it's going to be a lot more in person than last year, specifically for homecoming. We are going to be running a week-long patio on Concrete Beach called The Patio. Shout out to Calissa and her branding team. We're very excited for you to check it out, to have you there. Again, like I mentioned, it's going to be running for a week long. We're going to have talent performances. We're going to do a pancake breakfast on the Saturday morning. So we really hope to see you all there. And then with respect to O Week, I can't share too much just as of yet because we're still obviously in the process of signing contracts and figuring things out. But our O staff team and Maddie have been so hard at work. If this gives you any indication of what O Week will look like this year versus last year, we are going to be having the stage on UC Hill again. And we will be having programming on the Hill. So hopefully we're going to be able to give students that classic experience. Obviously safe, distance, and following all COVID rules and regulations. And we are working with the university really, really closely on this file. So know that safety is our top priority. Those are the two big things that I did want to mention. Beyond that, we have been working with our autonomous kind of student group stakeholders and supporting them with their programming and their return to campus. But all of Maddie's updates are also in that PDF, so I'm not gonna talk your ears off for no reason. I'll pass it to Calista to share her updates.
All right, yes. So as you can all see, and Samir mentioned that hiring applications out. So that was a campaign that my team has been recently working on. As always, all the social content, my team has been working on all of that. And as a note, counselors may not be able to take coordinator, intern, or associate positions as paid positions, but they can volunteer for these programs. So if you're interested in volunteering for any of the student support and programming volunteer portfolios, there's 150 positions. However, we do highly encourage you to communicate this to your constituents as well. You may receive an email from me to share some of this content. And if your faculty, affiliate, or professional council would like to share a graphic, you're always welcome to add your own logo to it. I'll communicate that all out early next week because these are open for a little bit. But yeah, communicating all those things to your students for the upcoming year would be fantastic. We know students are really excited to come back and get involved. And then other updates, we're working on the navigation of the website. We've gotten a lot of feedback on how we want that to improve. I really want that improved, so that's something I'm working on behind the scenes. And we have a larger communications team this year, which I'm very happy about. So we have 2 new full-time staff supporting me. So we're working on higher level communications plans and strategies on how we can better engage with students and keep up with all of it alongside all the things that happen throughout the year. So I'm really excited about that. And another thing I'm working on is with the roadmap planning, communicating that alongside the EDI and the sustainability frameworks. Those were put forth by last year's executives right at the end of their term. So that's something that we want to make sure we communicate effectively and make it engaging for students, council as well. And so a big initiative that I'm working on is how do we make these documents really transparent and appealing and readable and accessible to students. So that's a big project that I'm working on. And again, just general branding, the patio, purple care in our health and wellness plan. How do we connect that to students and all of our upcoming projects, general branding and identity for that. And then, yeah, there will be some stuff coming out about the health and dental plan. We know students have a lot of questions about this, about whether they can opt out or not, or what the benefits are. So again, when that information comes out, it'd be really great if it's uplifted, because we know a lot of students have questions about that. But yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet, and those are my updates.
Awesome, thanks, Calista. So my updates will also be pretty short and sweet. We are expecting an in-person clubs week, which is really exciting. It's likely going to be held on multiple different locations across campus. So like it'll be likely pretty spread out, but that's obviously to accommodate social distancing requirements. And like we might be able to hold some stuff outside, which actually could be really exciting. The date will likely be set in the next week or so. And when it is, that will be definitely communicated out to everybody. And safety also, like Samir has mentioned it a little bit already, is a really big concern, obviously, for us with social distancing and other things. So that's going to be a really big priority when we're planning and executing Clubs Week as well. Another thing that I'm working on right now is looking at the club's training and resources that are currently available to club executives and their members, with the goal of really making sure that club executives are able to support their members in the best way that they know how to, and that's specifically in relation to religious and ethnocultural clubs. I'm also, though, looking to provide more support to clubs in terms of financial and operational resources and support, so that they can run their clubs a little bit more smoothly and have things go a little bit more smoothly year to year as well. Just touching again, providing a little bit more context on something that Zamir has mentioned about our renovations being on hold. So that is unfortunately also affecting the club's space pretty significantly as well. And like Zamir said, it is pretty much out of our control at this point, which is pretty unfortunate. It's just up to the crews at this stage. So we're working very closely with them. A lot of our full-time staff are working very closely with them as well to try and get things moving again as fast as possible.
But just this, I want to share this. Just I think this is crazy, but very representative of the problems that are going on right now. One example of our renovations being on hold is that we literally cannot get doors for our rooms. Like our crews cannot find them anywhere. So it's really a problem. We can't open without doors. And then just a couple more things. I'm working, like Calista said, with her as well as the Galavan team, which is our insurance provider, on the health and dental plan. The service is available to students the way that we communicate that out, the way that Galavan communicates that out as well. And all in all, the goal is to just make all the information related to the health and dental plan much more easily accessible, much more streamlined, and much more straightforward for students to access and understand, so that when they need these services, they can do so with ease. And yeah, that's all I've got for everybody today.
Okay. So thank you all for being so attentive. That's everyone, Kevin. So back to you.
All right, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks a lot to the president and the VPs for sharing their reports. But yeah, so going on as usual, does Councilor Miller have anything that he'd like to add?
I think that was a very good summary. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. So now we'll move on to the question period for this motion. So if any councilors or any presidents like to ask any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. All right, I call upon Councilor Chen.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm just wondering, in terms of student experience, in terms of the vaccinations, I'm wondering if I could get some clarity on sort of the executive position on advocacy for this. Are we advocating for more support for housing when they engage in their vaccination policy? Or are we looking to like extend that mandatory vaccination policy to all students? I'm just wondering if I could get some clarity on where the executive and where the USC sort of stands on that.
Am I good to answer, Kevin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Ethan. So we are in favor of the mandatory vaccinations for residences with accommodations in place for students who need it. I spoke live on CB24 as well as spoke to Toronto Star about that specifically. I also want you to know that they are opening up another vaccination center and rapid testing location on campus for the fall. So there will be more supports available on campus to that end. But I'll also pass it really quickly to Ziana to provide a couple more dates.
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everyone. So the only other thing that I want to add here is that we are working really closely with housing to make sure that as they are figuring out what this looks like logistics wise and understanding what the reality will look like on the ground for students come the fall, that we're also communicating that to students. So we are attentive to this, and we will continue to work with housing to make sure that we're providing any student feedback that comes up and that we ensure this is a safe and well communicated process for everyone.
And really briefly, the last thing I'll mention is we will be encouraging students to get vaccinated on our social media and so forth.
All righty. So hopefully that answers Councilor Chen's question. So now we'll move on to the next one, which is Councilor Adnan with his question.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about Western Connect. So most students I consulted never really used it, and those that did had difficulty using it. So what is the executive's plan in terms of Western Connect? Are we going to change up the website, or are we going to keep it the same for the next year? And also another thing, like how does the Student Development Network play into all of this? Because its objectives seem like somewhat overlapping with the objectives of Western Connect.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions, Ohab. So like we talked about at our roundtable is that Western Connect is owned and operated by the university. And so we don't have direct jurisdiction. We can't unilaterally change things about it, but we can advocate for changes. And that is something that Ziana and I are actively working on with the careers and experience team at Western. And so we'll continue to provide updates on that end. Specifically speaking to the overlap between kind of the Student Development Network and Western Connect. The reason why we are opening up the Student Development Network is because there's been a lot of desire and demand on campus for peer-led and peer-facilitated professional development opportunities. And further to that, we have a very, very strong alumni network through the USC Foundation. And so we have access to a lot of a wealth of knowledge that Western otherwise can't tap into. So we definitely will be providing services that otherwise wouldn't be provided by Connect. And the last thing I'll mention is that the Student Development Network, unlike Western Connect, is also going to be focusing on political and civic education and engagement. We are anticipating an election is going to be called sometime soon. And so we just want to make sure that our students are also in a position where they understand and are aware of all the tools at their disposal to engage politically. And so that's also a little bit of a differentiation between the services that Western Connect provides. If you have any more questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Alrighty, so now we'll move on to the next question from the engineering president, Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. So in the update under sustainability, it said that Zamir, you attended the advisory committee for the environment and sustainability. It ended off saying that there was a need for support to convey the findings to students. Would that be an action item for council? Is that something that the USC is working on with the comms portfolio? Just wanted more clarity there.
I'm really, really glad you mentioned that because it actually slipped my mind. So thank you so much. When I attended the last PACES meeting of the year, we received a presentation on waste management and how Western is doing in that regard. And I wanted to verbally provide you all with some updates that are totally open, and you can share them with whomever you want. And I'm also more than happy to send this as an email after the fact. So if I'm listing too many statistics, let me know and I will also email it out. But some important things to note are that 54% of all waste at Western goes to landfills. It's not recycled, it's not organics, it goes to landfills. So that's something that we should be concerned about. There's also, Western has launched a waste and recycling portal on their website where you can actually request your garbage and your recycling and your organics and e-waste and so forth to all be picked up and so forth. And that's something that in 2020 alone was used to divert over 67,000 pounds of waste. But it's not something that's been communicated with students very, very well. So we're just thinking about how we can improve that. Further to that, there was, especially, I know when we all were running as candidates, we heard that the waste signage is inadequate on campus. So I've been in meetings with Western, and I've actually attended waste bin consultations where they've shown us waste bins that they want to put up on campus, and they've asked for our feedback. And it sounds boring. It's actually quite exciting. And there are new signage that's going to come up on all the waste bins throughout the year. They're already up in housing, and they're going to be rolled out throughout the rest of campus throughout the year. And the other things I will mention is that there are dining hall and lounge displays that are coming up. There's visual audits that EnviroWestern has been running in tandem with the university. So there's been like a lot of accomplishments that we've seen. And I'm realizing now that I'm just talking, I'm just going to send this out in an email because it would probably be a lot easier to retain and share that information. But I will send that all out, but that at a glance is all of the information we received. But specifically, we're looking for support in communicating how poorly we as a university are doing at waste diversion so that we can hopefully inspire folks to make better use of the waste bins and sortage options that are available. Sorry for the rant.
No worries, no worries. Hopefully that answers the question. And now we'll move on to the final question so far from Councilor Bajaj.
Okay, mine's less of a question, more of just like a suggestion. I was just wondering if in the future we could bring back the exec reports in the form of like slideshows. I know a lot of the times, like last year, they were PowerPoints and then you guys kind of expanded off of them, or the past executive team. I just feel like it might help counselors to engage a little bit because obviously you're all throwing a lot of information at us at once, and sometimes it's nice to be able to circle back. So.
No, absolutely. So we always do the slideshows for September onwards. More than happy to do it for our August council meeting if that is what, can we just do a quick poll if you want it in a PowerPoint for August? Do you want to just like throw an emoji up really quickly?
Like a PowerPoint in replacement of the PDF,
You will
or
still get it. You will still get a PDF, but we will also present a PowerPoint at the meeting. I'm seeing a lot of emojis. Okay, so I think that's what we'll do. It's a totally doable ask, and so we will do that. But also all the information we're sharing, it is, yeah, I apologize for the word vomit, but it also all is in the PDF. So if you ever need to like look back, you can do that. Also text any one of us if you just need a refresher, and I will email out those sustainability updates.
Alrighty. Am I assuming that President Mohan has another question?
yes, thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
I see in the student development under that section, we did engage with policy analysts from the Liberal Party to talk about international student work regulations. Less so concerned about the specific item and more so, do we have a general framework for how we engage with political parties? Just want to understand like that from a general sense and how the USC, perhaps for this specific item, how that engagement happened.
That is a great question, Chris, and I will pass it to Eunice to answer that. But really quickly, I'm just going to mute myself and turn my audio down. Just 2 seconds.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. Yeah, so in terms of like kind of how we figure out how we're gonna do these consultations, it first kind of depends on the like capacity in which they're reaching out to us. So I think the one you're talking about, that one was like through UCREW federally. So in that case, it's based off of like our strategic priorities, which like obviously USC priorities are part of that. And then if we're kind of reached out to in the USC capacity, we like have developed priorities based off of like my knowledge, you know, like research on the political parties, like past things that they've done on like the best routes that, and well, we'll see as like best outcome basically in the future. So we kind of like keep the themes around the same. So like student financial aid, like mental health, racial equity, but in terms of like the more specific points, we'll kind of alter it based off of, you know, the consultation that we're going into for like the best possible outcome that we kind of see coming from that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Wonderful. So seeing as that the speakers list has been exhausted, we'll now move on to the debate period. So if anyone wants to speak for or against the motion, please raise your hand for this. Seems like there are no points, which is okay. So now move on to the voting period. So please take a look at the turning point and please vote for this motion number 3.
Looking for 5 more votes. Three more votes. I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed and the motion carries unanimously.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Melissa. Alrighty, now that's the end for the executive reports. So now we'll move on to motion number 4, which is from the the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. So that is motion number 4, Transparency Working Group. So be it resolved that the USC Council create a working group on transparency based on the terms of reference in Appendix B. And this has already been moved by Councillor Chen and Councillor Dusick. So do either of them like to speak upon this motion? Please, Councillor Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan. I'm a social science counselor, and I'm here with Councillor Dusick to present the work we've been doing alongside Nathan and the GNF committee on our proposal for the Transparency Working Group. So we decided to introduce this working group because in both of our campaigns, a big theme that we heard was about the mistrust and uncertainty about the work that we as council do. And I think as councillors, we see this manifest in a lot of ways, from the low turnout to not really so much engagement in consultations, and a lot of students asking myself and probably a lot of you about what exactly we do. So we want to figure out a way to figure out why students feel this way and what in our process can change to solve this issue. So we want this working group so we can bring together counselors and students to figure out what council specifically can do to improve our current practices on transparency and how we can empower us to be more effective at representing students and students to feel like they can more meaningfully engage with council and see the items and the issues they want talked about, engaged, and talked about by their representatives. We also want to figure out how we can increase trust in the USC. I guess starting with the understanding our weaknesses in the current practices and outreach and seeing where we can improve, and methods to break through a lot of the red tape and jargon that sometimes surrounds a lot of stuff that we do. So in terms of specific goals, we want to work with students towards a policy paper, a review of other similar organizations and governments and their outreach strategies, and in general to look at best practices and mechanisms to achieve more transparency in the council itself. And at this time, I'll yield to Councillor Dusick to talk a bit more about specifics and what she also has to say about the working group.
Thanks, Ethan. You put all of that very eloquently, more than I could. So I just guess I'll elaborate on some of the work that Ethan and I have already done just to kind of prep for the working group, because I'm sure a lot of you have questions about what the USC is currently doing. And though I have no doubt that the USC currently does do its best to communicate effectively with students, I mean, we have an entire comms department. Currently, there's not a specific policy paper or specific action like set of principles, I guess, that the USC has for ensuring transparency. And the terms transparency and accountability are kind of littered throughout some of the policy papers. But if you've ever looked at the entire 400 some odd page document, like I did one day, there's not a specific concrete stance. So just in the future, so that we have a specific policy paper and working group to point to when students are asking or accusing the USC of not being transparent, we can say there is a working group working towards it, there is a policy paper, and the inclusion of students at large into the group will ensure that it's not just an echo chamber of people who are on council that already kind of understand the terminology and understand how everything's going. So that's the current plan. I don't think I have anything to add, but thanks, Ethan, for yielding some time.
All right, thanks to both counselors for their explanations. So now we'll move on to the questions. So if anyone would like to ask either of them any questions, please raise your hand. We'll note you down to the speakers list. All right, so as engineering president from Mohan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure this can be probably a friendly amendment, but under the composition, in writing it says 3, in parentheses it says 4 students at large would be part of the working group. I don't know which number it should be, but I had another question more substantive about what counselor means in this context. So for example, I think I'm a member of council, but I'm non-voting or a resource member, however you qualify it. So I'm curious if anyone knows if I myself, as someone who's a non-voting member, is eligible to be a part of such a committee.
I can answer that question.
Sorry, go ahead.
So according to the working group policy, so that's a separate policy, it needs to be voting members of council because they need to be able to vote on the working group as well. That doesn't mean that non-voting members of council can't engage in those meetings, but for the purposes of like council composition, if it says councilors, it means voting members.
And sorry, in terms of the 3 or 4 members, I think we'd be open to having, I think the composition should be 4 members.
So that can be treated as a clerical amendment, and that doesn't require, that's purely clerical.
That's good. All right, so next question is from Councilor Bajaj.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. My question is just regarding student feedback. I think obviously through including students at large, you guys have identified student feedback as something that's a priority. I'm just wondering if you guys have any plans in terms of like large scale student feedback, whether that's, you know, pairing with the comms portfolio to gather that, or, you know, looking at roundtables, etc. I just think a lot of the times the students who tend to engage with working groups directly are the ones who already are within the USC bubble or are engaged in our other services and might not necessarily have the same perspective as students that are completely unengaged from student politics.
Can I answer that, Mr. Speaker?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Yes, definitely, Nika. I think a big part of ours is trying to get outside that USC bubble, and that is through, you know, traditional consultations, but also going to students and seeking out like student leaders within specific groups because they understand their communities probably better than a lot of people engaging in this working group or in council do. So reaching out and being proactive in that is a great step that we're going to do. We also want to learn more from other organizations who have established accountability practices that are in effect from them and their experiences, and to bring both of that together to make sure that we're reaching out to as many students as possible. So thanks for that, Nika.
Seems like there are no other questions. So now we'll move on to the debate period. So anyone would like to make any amendments, speak for or against the motion, now's your chance. All right, so I first see President Fakarani.
Thank you, Kevin. Speaking in favor of the motion, first of all, I am so excited by this, and I'm glad that this is a priority for our counselors. It's also a priority for the executive. That's why we've dedicated a pillar to it as well. So very excited to collaborate with you all on this if it passes. I did want to make a motion to amend the terms of reference, however, to add Callista, our VP CPA, as a member of the working group, if that's of interest. Callista, obviously chairing the comms team, does most of our communications and transparency work with the student body, and we've had a conversation about it, and we think that there would be a lot of value in having Callista on the team as well.
I would be very happy with that amendment if Councilor Dusick you are.
Absolutely.
All right, so since seems like this motion is friendly, but Melissa, just to double check, do we still have to pass a vote for the amendment?
Yeah, so technically we don't do friendly amendments. Once an amendment is put on the floor, it becomes, for lack of a better term, the property of the whole council, not only the mover and seconder. So it requires a mover and a seconder for the amendment, and then a second kind of question and debate period. So we follow the same process. Once that amendment is passed or failed, then we can return to debate on the main motion.
Sounds good. So thanks, Melissa. So does anyone like to move and second for that?
Can I move the amendment? Is that allowed?
I think that's allowed. Yes, that
Okay,
is.
sure, I'll move.
And let anyone like the second for that?
I can second, Councilor Chen.
Sounds good. Alrighty. Would either the mover or the seconder like to speak upon the amendment? No? Okay, that's all right. Anyone like to ask questions about it? Oh, their hand went down. All right, so it seems like there aren't any questions. So let's move on to debate period. Anyone like to speak in favor or against this motion, which is an amendment to the previous motion? Sounds good. All right, so it seems like there are no more anything that anyone would like to say for this amendment. So now we'll move on to the voting period. So I assume we're also going to be doing a turning point for this.
So for amendments, I can't add things to turning point midway.
Oh, I see.
So what we'll need to do is you have a couple of options. You can ask people who want to abstain or object to message you, or we can use like choose an emoji to signal how you want to vote. That's up to you.
Okay.
But we can't do the amendment and Turning Point. We can do the final vote.
No worries. Okay, thanks for letting me know. All right. So we'll just do that. So if anyone would like to object to the motion or abstain, please privately message me. Otherwise, I'll assume that you are in favor of this amendment. So it seems like no one has messaged me, so let's assume that this amendment has passed. So now we'll move on to the original motion. So moving back to that, does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add in the debate portion for this motion for the Transparency Working Group? All right, so the engineering president, Mohan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Speaking in favor of this motion, but also would like to present caution. So obviously transparency is very good, and I think this working group will accomplish a lot. But I want to remind our councillors and the rest of council that this working group doesn't replace constituent engagement. It doesn't replace your role by default, which is at the end of this meeting, all these updates, it's your responsibility to send them to students. So I can see perhaps this working group providing best practices for counselors or other policies for the USC. But don't forget that a lot of the transparency is incumbent on you as someone who's directly representing students. Yeah.
Sounds good. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Councillor Chen.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to agree with Councillor Mohan completely on that. We hope to empower all of us basically to make our jobs easier and to make students feel more connected and more confident in the USC and in general. So I'm hoping that we can see that in the future.
Sounds good. So it seems like there are no more points. So now we'll move on to the voting period. So on Turning Point, we'll be voting for this motion, and stay tuned.
Waiting for 2 more votes. Okay, I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Melissa. All right, we'll now move on to the next portion of For Action, which is the University Affairs Standing Committee. And the motion at hand is the creation of an anti-racism working group. So
Kevin, we skipped the.
Oh, shoot. Apologies.
There we go.
Sorry. Motion number 4. Wait. Sorry. Okay. There we go. Okay. Never mind. Sorry. Motion number 5. Motion to adopt amended counselor terms of reference. So be it resolved that council accept amended counselor terms of reference, and has already been moved by President Fakarani. And do I have a seconder for this?
Councillor Mahakal, I can second it.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do either of you want to speak about it?
I would love to, thank you. So in the appendix, you'll see there's only one line we're changing. We're just adding to 3.2, counselors must accept the responsibility of having their voting and attendance records publicized by the USC and included in meeting minutes. That doesn't apply to in-camera sessions. I also want to note it would not apply to elections. Specifically when you all vote for your VPEA and UA, because that is a decision that will be made by the EGC, and the EGC has elected not to disclose those votes. EGC, everyone, is the Elections Governance Committee. But the reason we want to bring this motion forward is for two reasons. First and foremost, it is for transparency purposes. We want to make sure that our students are able to see how we're voting and if we're voting in their best interest. This also means that my vote will be public so that students can hold me accountable as well. We know that council attendance is amazing and we want to be able to communicate this to students. I really think it'll help bolster trust. And we can also use this information for your own benefits. In reference letters, when you're running for re-elections, you can actually talk about your election, your attendance and voting records. You can use it for your professional development and on your resumes and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits to council as well to passing this motion, in addition to transparency towards the student body. And I think ultimately the way we see it is that, executive council is accountable to this council, council is accountable to the student body, and making this information transparent and helps us to achieve our mandate. I also want to note that this is something that last year's council agreed to kind of through an amendment to the standing resolutions. The reason why we want to amend the council terms of reference to also reflect this change is because if you're a candidate and you're running in the election, or you're even thinking about whether or not you want to run, you don't have access to the standing resolutions, but you can get access to the policy manual. So we just want to make sure that when people are making the decision to run, that they know from the get-go that their attendance and voting records might be publicized. We don't want people to come into the rolls and then we spring it on them and there's confusion. And so we also just want to do it to be more proactive with our candidates. That's all I have to say to the motion.
Sounds good. Would the seconder like to say anything? Alrighty, so after that, we'll now be moving on to the question period. So raise your hand and we'll pick. All right, so I call upon Councillor Miller.
Hi, thank you so much. One question is, how and where would these be publicized?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. We are in the process of revitalizing our website. And I think from my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, Calista, we hope to put it on our website along with other council documents. For example, our agendas, that's a public document that all of our students should have access to, but currently it's not something that is shared with the student body. So it's hopefully going to be part of our website renovations. And I will pass it to Calista to add some more context.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm hoping to do a lot more council and counselor focused communications. I want to revamp the entire counselor page. I also want to have I found this idea from another former executive called the concrete speech. I want to add that to our USC News as well and have a council platform. So the work that you guys do in your committees, motions that you're really proud of, all of that, you guys can talk about those things. And then having those votes publicized kind of proves it and adds that legitimacy and having the numbers and percentages as well. So we're planning to do on the comm side a full rollout that kind of shows that the work that you do, and then that way when you apply for jobs you can also link that page in your resume and they can see from this year this is what this council did and all the work that you do. So we want it to benefit all of you as well, and if you run in future elections you'll have your page up there. So that's something that I'm always looking for feedback on that, and again, on the transparency committee, I definitely want that to be a topic that we discuss if that's what council wants to talk about. So yeah, I'm really hoping to do a lot of work in this area, and this is a part of that, but it would be on the website.
Sorry, really quickly, I have to apologize and clarify. Our agendas and our minutes and recordings are actually on the website. We just have to improve accessibility because your USC president didn't know they're up there. So would the average student.
All right. I did see Councilor Chen had a question raised up, but I'm not sure if he still does.
No, Councillor Miller asked it. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Oh, Councilor Adnan.
Yeah, so in terms of, having the accomplishments of each counselor up on the USC website when election period comes around, would this not, disproportionately favor incumbent counselors over new counselors? Because if I'm a new counselor, I don't really have any previous experience, even if I might be otherwise qualified. So, and like we want this new representation, right? We don't want the same people like winning these elections over and over again. So have we considered that?
Yeah, absolutely. And something we realize as an executive is that regardless, being able to say that you have been a counselor in the past will provide you with that same kind of I wouldn't always frame it as an advantage because the student body sometimes does like to see fresh new faces as well. So in that sense, I would say we're not seeing much of a change from what would be happening in the past. But I also do want to note that having the attendance and voting records publicized, the primary purpose isn't actually to be able to support, re-election campaigns, and the purpose isn't to support your resumes and so forth. I think that's just an added benefit. The real reason why we're doing it is just because students should know how their elected officials are acting on their behalf. And currently there is, I would argue, secrecy on that regard. Like, students don't know how I voted when I was social side president. And I feel like when I was running for USC president, they should have, because if I voted in a way that didn't reflect their needs and their desires, they should be able to call me out or call me in for that, because I was elected to represent them.
Sounds good. Seems like there aren't any further questions, so we'll move on to the debate period. So anyone would like to speak? Seems like no one has raised their hand, so now we'll move on to the voting.
I'm waiting for 6 more votes. Two more votes. Okay, I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. We'll now move on to motion number 6. So motion number 6, and that is motion to form the anti-racism working group. So there's a lot of get results statements, and I'm assuming that everyone took a look at the agenda already. So I'll just go ahead and say that's already been moved by Councillor Tu and Councillor Milanchuk. So if any of you would like to speak about the motion, please go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Kevin. So hello, everyone. My name is Jessie, and I'm a science counselor. And I've worked on this motion with my colleague, Councillor Milanchuk, who is a social science counselor. So I'll just briefly go over the motion if anyone has not been able to review it yet. So the way that we're kind of approaching this is that we've seen that students from underrepresented communities at Western have been repeatedly subjected to acts of racial prejudice, harassment, and discrimination. We all know that these acts are definitely not isolated incidents, rather they're part of a larger systemic problem in our society. I think it's very, very evident in our media nowadays with the rise of anti-Asian violence, anti-Black violence, as well as anti-Muslim, anti-Islamophobic violence. Sorry about that. So that's why we thought it would be a great idea to carry on the amazing work that the anti-oppression group has done in the past years by forming our own anti-racism working group. So through this working group, what we are planning to do is to write a policy brief that provides recommendations on how we can incorporate more anti-racism and equity, diversity, inclusion into the USC policies, as well as how we advocate for student needs to the Western administration. We are also planning to conduct consultations with every ethnocultural club and service on campus to get their input on these recommendations, as well as creating a conference to really amplify the voices of racialized students on campus. And now Councillor Melanchuk will talk a little bit more about the composition of the working group.
Yeah, so sort of going off of what Councillor Chu said, the composition of the working group is going to consist of 5 counselors and 5 students at large to make sure that council is adequately represented on this working group, but to also make sure that students across campus are represented and students from all different backgrounds are also represented on this working group. I think it's really important that the students sort of on the working group are also represent the sort of students that we're advocating for. So make sure that there's enough racialized students, people from different sort of backgrounds on this working group, because the people sort of running the working group will generally steer where this, where the advocacy goes. And then that sort of goes to the sort of structure of the working group. As you can see in the motion that we put in, that there's going to be 1 chair, 1 vice chair, and 1 secretary. And I think this is important to make sure that people sort of leading the working group, or the leadership in the working group, is sort of representative of people from different backgrounds. And it also holds people accountable in keeping the working group afloat and keeping it productive. I also think I want to mention that as you guys know, there was the anti-oppression working group last year, and this year, this is pretty much sort of the replacement for it. And we're calling it the anti-racism working group because consultations with other counselors and people just in general, students, we've sort of come to the conclusion that we need to address racism at the forefront, because racism intersects with various different other marginalized communities, or certain marginalized aspects of someone's life, such as their religion, their ability, and stuff along those lines. But it's really important to address racism at its core, that need to be addressed in their own respective aspects otherwise. So very much this working group is also focusing on intersectionality, because it is important, but we are focusing on racism because that needs to be addressed really, really crucially. And it's something that affects a lot of students on Western, especially racialized students, well, obviously racialized students, but if people who don't really experience it may not understand the sort of impacts that it has on students, which is very, very strong. And it's something that racialized students have to think about on every day when they come to a predominantly white institution. Furthermore, going through the motion, we're going to be reporting to the University Affairs Standing Committee. We believe that it's the sort of best committee to be reporting to in order for effectiveness at the USC and at the university. It's going to be a majority internal vote to make sure that everyone sort of comes to the same consensus. And as Councillor Chu said, we're going to be holding mass consultations to make sure that every racialized student's voice is heard, and to make sure that our EDI sort of programming at the USC and at Western reflects racialized students' needs best as possible. And yeah.
That's good. Thanks a lot. Any questions from anyone? Councillor Clark.
Hi. First of all, just like you guys spoke very well, so thank you so much for kind of elaborating on the nature of the working group. I actually just have a question with regards to the clause that talks about consultations with ethnocultural clubs and services on campus. I think that's a great idea and really important, kind of gauging their perspective and getting their insights. I suppose this isn't, I'll phrase it as a question, but I was wondering if you guys were interested in doing consultations with groups like Pride Western, for example, or the Gender Equality Network on campus. I know that those aren't technically culturally related clubs, but I think getting their perspectives would be interesting too, especially as you guys spoke about having kind of that intersectional lens, understanding how kind of racism affects particularly the LGBTQ plus community on campus might have a disproportionate impact. So I was just wondering if that was kind of on your radar.
I can answer that. It definitely is on our radar. As again, we spoke about intersectionality, how people of color and people of the LGBTQ plus community sort of have different sort of experiences as members of sort of communities. I think that's something that's going to be coming down the line after we sort of consultate ethnocultural clubs, various student leaders, various racialized student leaders, when our research sort of becomes more to the sort of, when we sort of have like a general idea of what the majority of racialized students sort of need, and then we go into sort of not the niche, but how it sort of intersects with again racialized students who are also LGBTQ plus members, various religious minorities who are also racialized students, and so on and so forth. But that is definitely on our radar, and I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
All right. Apologies if I say your name incorrectly, but Councillor Poirier.
Hi, I'm Councillor Magder's proxy, but I just wanted to ask a question, kind of coming off Councillor Clark's question. So in those consultations, will you also be consulting with the various affiliate ethnocultural groups? Like I know at Huron we have HICA or other kind of student organizations.
Yeah, I can definitely answer your question. So this is definitely on our radar. We want to incorporate the voices of not just main campus students, but also HBK. I think that the experiences of racialized students on every campus may differ, and it's very important to take that into account when we present our recommendations to Western Admin.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, seems that there are no more questions, we'll move on to the debate period. President Fakarani.
Thank you. Speaking in favor of the motion, I'm really excited to see the work that this working group achieves. I just wanted to propose an amendment to the be it resolved clause. Be it further resolved that this working group be composed of 5 counselors and 5 students at large elected by council. If you are interested, I would recommend adding the VP University Affairs to your working group. Ziana and I have also chatted about it, and she has expressed interest, and I think since she holds the anti-racism and equity work file amongst our executive, she might be a great resource member for you folks to have on the team.
Alrighty, does anyone like to be the mover for that?
I can move it, Councilor Malenchuk.
Sounds good. And anyone like to second for it?
I can second it, Councilor Malco.
Sounds good. Do either of you want to speak about the amendment?
Yes, for sure. So we've had Councillor Chu and I have had not multiple, but had some talks with Ziana, and I think she'd be a really great addition to this working group, as she's had her previous experience and is super passionate about anti-racism work, and also and obviously in her leadership position as VPUA. So I think she'd be an excellent addition to this working group and would definitely help it progress in a really productive way.
Sounds good. All right, so now we'll move on to the question period for this amendment. I do see one hand up. So does the proxy for the councillor have anything to ask?
No, sorry, I forgot to.
Oh, no worries, no worries, no worries. Seems like there aren't any other questions. Are there any, is there any debate? Seems that there's nothing. All right, let's do a vote. Just to keep things simple, why don't we'll do reactions. So on the reaction bar, there's a yes, no, and a raise hand. So if you're in favor, you can vote yes. And if you're against, vote no. And if you are Abstaining, just click like a raise, like a thumbs up. Yeah, no, so I see a question in the chat. Since it's an amendment, we can't add on a vote, so we'll just have to do a quick emoji reaction. No worries. Right, it seems like everyone has been voting yes, so we'll assume that it's been passed unanimously. So now we'll go on to the original motion. So back to the debate period for motion number 6. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Right, seems like there's nothing, so we'll now move on to the voting period. Let's just double checking is the voting going right?
It is. I am waiting for 5 more people.
Sounds good.
Got 2 more people who haven't voted yet. I'll just give it just a couple more seconds. I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. And the motion carries unanimously.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Melissa. All right, we're now complete with this motion, but President Falcone has moved that we recess for lunch. So do I have anyone who'd like to second for that?
Councilor Bajaj, I'll second.
Sounds good. Since it's just lunch, I'm not sure if we need a question period for that. So I'll just assume if anyone. So what will we say that I'm not sure if the mover or seconder would agree. Why don't we just break for 30 minutes so everyone just come back at 12:20? So does anyone have any objections to that? Okay, seems like everyone's good for that. So yeah, enjoy lunch, everyone, or brunch since it's still the morning. But yeah, I'll see you guys all at 12:20. But yeah, Melissa, do you think I should wait for until more people join in, or do you think it's probably best to wait, or just go ahead?
I'm just taking a look to see if anyone is jumping out as being missing. I think, sorry, the other thing I'm checking is Turning Point just to see if anybody's logged out, but they haven't. I think you're good to go ahead. There's 40 people logged into Turning Point, which is the same as it was before. So you're probably okay to continue.
Sounds good. Vanessa, is it okay if you if you can share the PowerPoint, or do you want me to? Vanessa?
Yep. Can you give me, am I a co-host?
I think I can make you oh, wait. Melissa, could you make Vanessa co-host? Okay, cool. There we go.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so now we're going to move on to motion number 7. So motion to endorse the collection of equity-based data by Western. So there's 2 be it resolved statements, but I'll just keep it short. And there is a mover, President Fakarani. Do I have someone like a second for this? Motion number 7.
Councilor Mahakal, I can second.
Sounds good. All right. Do either of you want to speak on behalf of it?
Yes, please. Thank you. So to give everyone a little bit of insight as to why we're bringing this forward as a motion, usually USC executives, when we're conducting our advocacy, loop in counselors a little bit too late in the process in the assessment of myself and the rest of my executive. And we want to make sure we're being a lot more proactive when we're advocating, because like I mentioned earlier with respect to the executive reports, it bolsters our advocacy potential if we're able to say this is not just something that the executive want, but that our council on behalf of the student body want. Specifically, what we're doing here, like Ziana mentioned during her report, is that Western is looking into releasing a pilot to collect demographic data on the student body so that they're able to actually make data-driven and informed solutions to the equity issues we're seeing on campus. We as an executive are in favor of it, and we are hoping that we can have a conversation at council about it. I do want to note 2 quick things, however. One, in the final B for the resolve statement, you'll notice it says timeline ? That's because that's something we wanted to discuss with you all before putting something in the motion itself. We know now that Western is aiming to have a pilot project in time, hopefully for fall 2021. So we can say by fall 2021 there, so that we're able to push the university to stick to that timeline. Or we can just not have a timeline whatsoever and just endorse it kind of as a principle that we would like to see. The other thing I want to note is, and this is maybe a more procedural question for Melissa, but there was a whereas and a be it resolved statement that was added by the University Affairs Standing Committee that I'm not seeing in the agenda and in this motion right here. So I'm wondering if I should motion to add it or if we can just add it back.
Nope, we can add it back. I'm very sorry. I thought I had put in the amended version. Give me 1 second. I can do that now.
And I just sent them in the chat if you just want to copy paste them.
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries. I also noticed a similar issue on motion 10, but we can get to that when we get to motion 10. Okay. But thank you, Kevin. That's all.
All right. President Mahakal, do you have anything?
Nope, I think President Fakarani spoke to it very well.
All right, sounds good. Any questions to them? All right, President Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question as to how we are defining equity and race-based data. And I ask in support of collecting it, but I think the way we define that, we can, there's the opportunity for certain groups to bureaucratically not be represented in advocacy. So do we have a comprehensive list of what data we believe should be collected as the USC, or are we relying on the university to create those parameters for us?
Yeah, so it's not in the motion itself, but Ziana and I met with the anti-racism advisors last week, Bertha and Lisa, and we clarified what this pilot is going to look like. We said that it should include as many aspects of the identities listed in the Ontario Human Rights Code as possible, and they did confirm that they are also aiming to include as many of those identities as possible. The reason we just left it a little bit more vague here is just so that we could work with the university to kind of discern what would be most relevant and what would be in the best interest of students' security and privacy as well. But we're more we can always add a clause or further specify if that's something that's of interest to council.
That's good. All right, Councilor Adnan.
Yeah, so is it possible to include financial data here as well? Because I know a lot of discrimination, like either explicit or implicit, is drawn on the lines of wealth. So, for example, like expensive extracurricular opportunities that someone might not be able to afford, to maybe just like how they dress. So are we able to include that data like in this motion, or maybe like somewhere later on down the line? Because I don't just want us focusing only on, like race, because there are other forms of discrimination as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think we can, in debate period, just motion to amend the um, whereas clause to just say maybe collection of equity, race, and socioeconomic based data, something along those lines. And then we don't have to amend the rest because in the whereas clause, it says henceforth equity-based data. So we can just keep that wording, but I'm more than happy to add socioeconomic status to the first whereas clause. I think that'd be very helpful.
Councilor Jaman.
Thank you. I was also going to ask along the same lines, would equity-based data include accessibility like students with disabilities, or would that be under a different realm?
Yeah, that definitely would. Really quickly, if it would be helpful, the Ontario Human Rights Code identifies discrimination on the basis of, and it's also in motion 10 if you want to check it out, but race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender orientation, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, and disability. So disability is included, yes.
Be fantastic, thank you.
Right, engineering president.
Thank you, Chair. So I also want to just bring up the question of ensuring privacy, but also, like, will students have to consent to the collection of this data? Do we have a stance on that? Because I think it's one thing to say that, like, we support the university collecting this data if students so choose to provide it. But it's another thing to say that we support the collection of data without, the students having the option to opt out.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that went to University Affairs, and University Affairs added a whereas clause that says student privacy and confidentiality are of utmost importance to students. And if be it further resolved that the USC emphasize the protection of privacy of the students when advocating for the collection of the aforementioned data. So that's just missing, but it's something that went through UA, so it will be in this motion. Like specifically, if we have a stance yet, the answer is no. Currently, Lisa, Bertha, and their team are starting with a data governance policy. And once they actually create the policy, then they're going to actually start building out the questions. But that is kind of like the ultimate priority right now. They have offered for the USC to consult on the issue. So we are going to be doing a lot more research before we kind of get into that. Oh, and it says that consent will be required. So, okay, but then maybe we are good in that respect, but they definitely have they have confirmed that they do have a student rep on their team, and then they're also going to consult with us for our opinion. I hope that answers the question.
If you want some legal context, basically what has to happen is that every public institution is governed by privacy legislation at the provincial and federal levels, and consent is one of the key pieces of each of those pieces of legislation. So no public institution can collect data without anyone else's consent. So it's covered just by virtue of where we are.
And we can be explicit if we do want to be, but that's really, really helpful context. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, it seems like there aren't any more questions, so we'll go to the debate period. So I know that President Faccarini did propose the amendment, but if anyone would like to mention anything else for amendments. All right,
Yes.
Councilor Arden.
Yeah, so I would just like to propose an amendment where, like in the first whereas line, instead of collection of equity and race-based data, changing that to equity, race, and socioeconomic based data.
Sounds good. Does anyone like to be a mover for that?
Councillor Jarman?
Sounds good. Anyone like to second for that?
Councillor Zhu, social science, I can second.
Sure. All right. Do either the mover or the seconder wish to speak upon the motion?
Honestly, I think it's a great idea. Zoe spoke to it very nicely. I think there's a lot of reasons why we might want to have a better understanding of how people stack up socioeconomically as well here at Western.
Sounds good. Right. So we'll now move on to the question period. Any questions about this amendment? There seems to be nothing. Any debate for it? All right. So we'll move on to the voting period. So same thing as before. The yes button if you're in favor, the no button if you're out. Oh, President Fakarani, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, just really quickly, Kevin, we just have to decide for the final beat for the resolve clause if we want to set a timeline of no later than fall 2021 or if we want to not set a timeline.
Okay. That's like, oh, go ahead.
No, go. I was just gonna say I can propose one and then council can either vote for or against and then we can see if it passes, if they want that one or the other one, but you know best.
Sounds good. Why don't we first make the amendment for the socioeconomic amendment first, and then we'll get to your amendment afterwards.
Oh,
so,
sorry. Putting on the
yeah,
motion.
no worries. We're just about to get to that, so almost there. All right, so just to vote for the amendment to add socioeconomic data, using the reaction buttons, vote yes for yes, and vote no for no, and thumbs up if you want to abstain. All right. Seems like everyone a lot of yeses, so it passes. This amendment passes. All right. So I know that President Fakarani did have his amendment, so please, if you'd like to share it.
Okay, so I'm going to propose we motion to amend the final beat for the resolve clause to just say the USC encouraged Western University to commence a collection of equity-based data on the student population no later than fall 2021. And then I would say, like, if you support that timeline, vote yes. But if you don't want us to have a timeline, vote no, right? I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so does anyone like to make a move for that amendment? All right, any seconder?
I can second.
Oh.
I can second Councillor Malanchuk.
Yeah, for sure. All right, any questions for this? Any debate? All right, Councillor Zhu.
Yeah, I guess I'll say something. I think it's a good idea to have a timeline in place just because whenever we're putting out an ask, whenever we're setting a goal for ourselves, I think it's always good to have that timeline set, right? We need to be held accountable to that timeline. We want to get things done.
Councillor Chen.
Thank you. Yes, Eric is right, but also considering the fact that this year especially, it's so important to understand those socioeconomic and race-based data, especially given the recent trends towards more of this collection. We have to make sure that we're staying current, as well as a lot of the socioeconomic upheaval in the past couple of years to months has really taken a toll on a lot of students, especially when it comes to student financial aid and a lot of these issues. So making sure that we get the most relevant data is key. Thank you.
Sure. And Councillor Malanchuk.
Yeah, just going to quickly say, I think it's really important that this gets done, honestly, as soon as possible. Westerns, I would say, is like pretty behind in not having race, socioeconomic, in various data, but specifically for race, because such as and anti-racism work in general, like having race-based data is so important in making productive and applicable sort of solutions to these problems for racialized students and marginalized students in general. So it's really important that this gets done as soon as possible. And
Good. All right. No more people wishing for debate, so we'll go into voting. So same idea for the voting with the reactions. Yeah. All right, seems like everyone's voting yes, so the ayes have it. All right, so with that amendment being passed, we'll go back to the debate portion for motion number 7. Anyone else like to add anything? right, Councilor Bajaj. President Bajaj, sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to add that I'm speaking in favor of this motion. When I was campaigning for SSC president, it was something that was flagged a lot to me as being kind of the pivotal point to starting more systemic anti-racism work on campus. And I think it also serves as the opportunity for Western to really be a trailblazer at addressing our systemic racism within the institution. Currently, 63 out of 76 Canadian institutions do not collect any form of race-based or demographic data. So really serves as the opportunity for Western and the USC to take this as a pinpoint going forward and really pilot that work. Sorry, I almost said pirate. Not what I'm trying to do, but yeah, thank you.
Sure, for sure. Anyone else? Sounds good. Okay, so we'll now move on to voting for this motion. So we'll take a look at Turning Point and fill out the vote.
Just to note that, as I said already, I can't update Turning Point once we're up and running, but if you look at the agenda, it has the full motion as amended. Waiting for 4 more people. One more person. Okay, I'm going to close the polls in 3, 2, 1. And the motion carries unanimously.
Sounds good. All right, motion number 8. So motion to endorse the addition of the VPUA as an ex officio non-voting member of the Senate. So be it resolved that the USC endorse the addition of the VPUA as an ex officio non-voting member of the Senate, and it's been moved by President Fakrani. Do I have anyone who'd like to second?
Councilor Mahakal, I can second it.
That's good. All right. So do either of you want to speak about it?
Yes, please. And I apologize to everyone. I'm sure you're getting tired of my voice. So as you guys may know, 2 years ago, the USC underwent a restructuring of our executive team in order to add capacity for the position of the vice president to be present for our students, and for the role of the USC VP was actually split into 2. So now we have the VP University Affairs and the VP External Affairs, who respectively lead university and external advocacy. And the VPUA, so Ziana, works super duper closely with the university community to make sure that student perspectives are at the table, and that student voices are listened to on issues that are impacting us. Last year was the first year we had the VPUA. And it was a great opportunity to develop a sense of where the USC's internal advocacy efforts could be better fleshed out compared to years prior. And last year's VPUA, Victoria Barroso, was a huge support for Senate. She attended all the Senate meetings and supported a lot of their working groups and so forth and committees. But the VPUA is only an observer at Senate, and they don't actually have ex officio status like the USC president does. Sometimes that makes it really challenging for us to advocate on issues because, for example, if I'm on a working group that had to endorse or actually work to create a particular document, as USC president, I should have to support that motion. as a kind of show of professionalism for the working group and all the hard work they put in. But that's not to say that the work that was produced was perfect, and we need to be able to have a voice that's also able to say yes, but, and that's the role of the VPUA, especially at Senate. And given the fact that Senate is responsible for academic policy of the university and that this is one of the biggest focuses of the VPUA, we as a US executive think that there is a strong rationale for the VPUA having an ex officio seat at Senate. We've also consulted with the student senators, and the incoming chair, Artika, is also in support of this move. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is we're working with the Secretariat, and we have to introduce a motion at Senate to get Ziana, or Ziana's position, this vote. Sorry, not this vote, this seat. But in order to do that, it could really, really strengthen our ability to make a good argument for this by saying that, okay, our counselors who represent the student body also believe that this is a really, really good idea. You obviously can choose to vote for or against. I firmly think it's a good idea, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. But that's this motion at a glance.
Does President Mahal have anything?
Yeah, I also would like to say that I think this is a very, very good move on behalf of the USC. I think this past year we've really seen how important and how, I guess, like lacking our academic advocacy efforts have been. And I think having Ziana or the VPUA at or in this position could really strengthen our arguments in that sense. So I do definitely support it.
That's good. All right. Any questions? All right, President Mohan.
I'm not sure if anyone can kind of speak to the climate on the floor of the Senate. I'm not particularly familiar, but do we think this kind of motion would pass? Is there really like a strong case that needs to be made, or do we think that most Senate members, faculty would be in support of this?
Yeah, so in order for this to pass, it does not go to Senate, it goes to, what's the name of their membership subcommittee? Yeah, I don't know the name offhand, but there's a smaller subcommittee that it goes to, and there is a student voice there, and there are a couple administrators that I hold a very close connection to. So I think it's definitely going to be a challenge, but I think it's possible, especially if we're able to say that this is what students also want to see, but definitely possible.
Seems like there aren't any other questions, so we'll move into debate. All right, Councillor Chen.
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favor of this motion. I think not only are the points that President Vaccaroni mentioned are very valuable, but it's also in the best interest of students and counselors to put the VPUA on the Senate as well, because the VPUA represents us as counselors and as students, and by putting her on there, she represents our voice, and she kind of makes us more influential on the university's academic decision making as a whole, so that by extension is beneficial for the USC, for the council, and for the students. So that's why I'm going to vote in favor of this.
Councillor Zhu.
Yeah, just wanted to speak in favor as well. I think Ziona has always been a great advocate for the student body, and I think it's definitely somebody we'd love to have on the Senate. And Zamir mentioned that it might take a little bit of effort to try and get this through that board. So I think as a council, we can offer our support in convincing them over. Yeah.
All right, and President Vaccaroni.
I just really quickly wanted to reply to Chris. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure. Okay,
I just checked my notes. It is the Operations and Agenda Committee. So I sent a link in the chat of who the membership is. So again, I believe it's definitely possible. Also, the next Senate meetings aren't until September. So we definitely have all of August to kind of game plan and plan out our strategy. And we are receiving an information packet from the University Secretariat in the coming week. She was just on vacation, explaining how to actually bring forward this motion and the exact procedures to follow. So we're definitely already kind of on track.
Let's go. And Councillor Zhu.
Sorry, that was from before.
Oh, no worries. No worries. All right. So no more hands up. So we'll now go into the voting for this. So I think you muted yourself accidentally.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Looks like we're waiting for 7 people.
Sounds good.
One. Polls are closed and the motion carries unanimously.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Alrighty. Now on to the next motion, motion number 9. Be resolved, the USC officially strike up the anti-sexual and gender-based violence working group for the 2021-2022 council term. And it's been moved by Councillor Thompson and President Biraj. Do any of you like to speak upon it?
Yeah, so I would just like to begin by yielding my time to Councillor Bajaj to set up the context of her motion, and then I will follow up with what I have to say afterwards.
Sounds good.
Okay, hi everyone. Nice to see you all. So I'm just going to start off by setting the context of this motion and provide a little bit of insight into what we did last year. I'd just like to start by saying that this motion will discuss anti-sexual and gender-based violence. So if that is something that's triggering to you, please just, turn your volume down or tap out for this part of the meeting. I understand that it can be definitely a difficult topic to hear about. So yeah, as the motion specifies, the 2018 report from the Council of Ontario Universities indicated that 71% of university students at Western have experienced sexual harassment and 31% have experienced sexual assault. This is what once again confirmed to us that sexual violence is very much prevalent within our campus. And even further to that, in 2018, London produced a Safe Cities report, and Western University specifically was identified as an area where women felt unsafe. But we recognize that, it is not just women and female identifying students that experience sexual and gender-based violence, but, all students and all identities. So from that, last year we created an anti-sexual and gender-based violence working group. Councillors Ali and Councillor Campbell started it. And through that working group, it was really that, and being a part of that working group, it was really that I was able to see, the great parts of it and the work that still needs to be done, but also identify how we can be more productive this year and accomplish more. So some of the things that we've aimed to change this year is we've actually made the size of the working group smaller, which may seem odd if we're trying to tackle more, but I think the biggest things we found last year is sometimes when you add too many people, productivity actually goes down because, the roles of each identified counselor were less and there was just a lot more confusion. And that's why we've stuck with 6 counselors, 2 resource members, and then within those 6 counselors having 2 elected co-chairs. Ava and I have identified kind of 2 co-chairs for the reason being that we're hoping the work can be a little bit split in terms of our outcomes. So if you read our terms of reference, we have kind of 2 key goals, and Ava will touch on this more, but we're looking to produce both policy review and recommendations alongside an all-encompassing resource guide. Some of the areas last year that we weren't able to get to that we're hoping will continue and expand is we're hoping to do, more student feedback and consultations. And this is something that we think is really important, and the reason why we're looping in 2 key resource members, VP Katadia, as well as the Gender Equality Network Coordinator, who is Julie Van this year. And so I've had the opportunity to meet with Shrinity, who's the current associate peer programs for this year. And then I have a meeting set up this week with Julie. And we've really been able to discuss the fact that the Gender Equality Network has a lot of resources and great outreach into students that are critically engaged with this issue, so that we'll be able to conduct good student feedback, but also that they've done a lot of internal policy review already regarding a lot of the key universities in Canada that have similar policies. And we're hoping to bring in that knowledge and research as well, so we can touch on what other universities may be doing better than us in terms of supporting survivors and how we should be moving forward in terms of our Westerns policy. And then finally, I just wanted to touch a little bit on how we're going to be going about training our members. So it's something that Ava and I've talked a lot about. If we are, elected to the working group as counselors ourselves, we want to ensure that every member of the working group is trained holistically in both consultations and just in general anti-sexual and gender-based violence approaches. So that is something that we will be discussing further once the working group has passed, pending all of your support. But if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. I'll pass it back over to Councillor Thompson to kind of expand on the outcomes of the working group.
Awesome. So thank you, Councillor Bajaj. And as she said, just going to be going into more details of what we've kind of been working on here. And of the 2 things we would like to focus on, the first being our resource guide. The aim is to be addressing scattered survivor resources. Currently, the process of reporting looks very different depending on a lot of factors, when and where survivors are choosing to report, whether that's within residence, off campus, with campus police, and then there's also even the timeline of it, whether it's immediately or following 2 weeks after the occurrence. It can also even be a matter of digitally or in person. And so we're not trying to add to extra burden to this reporting process, rather use this resource to consolidate the tools that are available to survivors for when they do choose to report, because we know it can be a scary and kind of a grueling long process. And then because of this confusing reporting system, survivors often don't know what to expect or where to seek these resources, as is depending on their wants and needs. So the guide aims to be a student-wide resource that's produced by the USC to allow survivors to be empowered and to report and have a solid understanding of what that process looks like if they choose to begin it. And then the second thing we would like to do under this working group is to produce policy recommendations in a report. And in doing that, we would like to be designing actionable USC endorsed recommendations on Western University's 2 policies, one being the Women X policy paper, and the second is the policy on gender-based and sexual violence, which will be up for review in fall 2023. And part of our intended process is consulting with survivors to comprehend the shortcomings of our standing policies and how that process actually is or is not working for them. In the past, this working group didn't work directly with or in contact with the executive, so specifically the Vice President of University Affairs. And it's our goal to not be repeating work. And we've met with VP Katadia twice to confirm the executive's priorities for this year and ensure that our goals would be aligning with that. And we aim to use this as an opportunity to produce tandem work in partnership as well, so that we can approach this policy in like a survivor-centric manner. And lastly, with all of that, we've been able to discuss a timeline which aims to have survivor consultations completed by November, so within the October to November range, moving on to policy recommendations between October to January, so they can be ready for review. And then lastly, we would like for that resource guide to fall to February to April and have focus then. So thank you for listening. And I just want to echo the aforementioned statistics that Councillor Bajaj shared with us, which really make clear why we're bringing this motion to you all today. And we're also happy to take questions.
Alrighty, so now we're going to questions. Anyone would like to ask questions?
Hi, Councillor Tu here. I really love what you guys just presented. I just had one question to further clarify the consultation process. So how do you plan to kind of recruit survivors to participate and kind of, I guess, use that kind of information to form policy recommendations?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the biggest thing with consultations, especially survivor-centric consultations, and why we didn't do them last year, is we're not trying to, re-trigger or rehash any trauma in a way that's, further traumatizing to survivors. So that'll be done alongside VP Katadia to ensure that, all consultations are being done in a very ethical practice and that survivors are being compensated for any consultations that they're doing in meaningful ways. So, I don't have a specific outline, but I'm assuming it'll be kind of an open call. So we're not, specifically targeting anyone's lived experience. Like I don't want this to be oh, I know someone personally that is a survivor, I'm just going to message them on Facebook. I think there's, something problematic about that, but instead giving students the opportunity to come forward themselves and be willing to share their stories.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it would be really, really important just to have the consultations reflect all the vastly different experiences that survivors have, especially at Western.
All right. Next one is the Council Adnan.
Yeah, so a lot of these situations occur like in housing on residents. So is there any precedent or possibility of collaboration with Western Housing on this matter? I know they have like an entirely different jurisdiction, but like, is that even possible?
Yeah, so I know this is something that you and I discussed within the University Affairs Standing Committee meeting when this motion was first presented. And I just want to clarify further that what the USC is doing here and what this working group is aiming to do is provide policy recommendations. We as the USC are a separate jurisdiction and we cannot edit their policy ourselves. It's just, not within our jurisdiction. We aren't the university. But instead, what we are looking to do is provide those meaningful consultations and those meaningful recommendations that are actionable and that housing and the university and student experience can then act upon. That doesn't mean that we're never going to collaborate with housing in terms of a consult. I'm more than happy as someone who's worked in residence life, both as a SOF and as a residence council president, to sit down with key stakeholders like Melissa Stedman, Chris Elaine, etc., and discuss the policy further and what they feel can be edited. But we also understand that the USC and housing have very different approaches to how they want to address sexual and gender-based violence. One takes a very legal standpoint in terms of protecting the university and their reputation, whereas I am here personally for survivors and to ensure that they are getting the justice and the support that they feel they need to, continue forward within their university career. So then this working group, personally speaking on behalf of Councillor Thompson and I, is not looking to partner with housing, but I'm happy to consult and to discuss where our views line up in terms of survivor-centric approaches.
That's good. All right. Next question, we have Councillor Clark.
Hi, so I just wanted to say, like, off the bat, both of you spoke very well, and I think this is an incredibly important working group that needs to be passed, so thank you so much, both of you, for bringing it to the table. My question is mostly focused on terms of not consultations with survivors, but to my understanding that there's two primary ways in which a student can file a complaint of gender-based violence, so one of those through the Student Code of Conduct and the other through campus police. So does the working group intend to consult with representatives from both those bodies, whether that be to understand the initial complaint process itself and clarify that on the resource guide that you spoke about, as well as kind of the investigation that goes if students choose to pursue that route?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the biggest thing when looking at the different approaches and the resource guide specifically is we want students to have kind of an all-encompassing understanding of what each reporting process will look like. I think oftentimes, Councillor Clark, as a SOF, because you've been well trained within reporting looks very different depending on where you're doing it, whether that's campus police, whether that's internally at Western, whether that's through the London policing services. Students do have a lot of different avenues that they can take in reporting, but how those will look, the timeline and the resources that they will receive depending on where they report are very different. And that's something we want to kind of explore all encompassing. Any resource guide that's put forward, I also want to ensure has resources that are, Canadian wide. And the reason for that being is something that we've heard a lot within consultations that I personally did for my own campaign is a lot of the times there is no bridge back program in terms of, oftentimes sexual and gender-based violence can occur at any time in your university career. You head back home for a summer, or you head back home because you finished your degree and you don't have any resources within your community, or you don't know where to go. So that's something, again, like I want to be addressing within the guide. And I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. And I think particularly the point about bridging back is very important. Just like you said, we have students who, go off campus at any point during the year, whether that be for a holiday or for a reading week or even just home for a weekend. And so making sure those resources are still in place when they're not within kind of the walls of the university is imperative.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
All right, and the next one is Councilor Dusek.
Yeah, I think the work that you guys are doing with this working group is fantastic. It's definitely necessary. I had more of a question about a broad scope about something that the USC might have more jurisdiction over. I know, Nika, you mentioned that the USC doesn't have a ton of jurisdiction in like the housing world, but we do definitely have a little bit more influence in like the club space. So I was wondering, kind of a twofold question. One, was there kind of going to be a plan to go back to each club and kind of evaluate like the gender-based violence culture there? Because I think we're all aware that there's certain clubs on campus that may cultivate a culture of that kind of behavior. And two, just speaking from like my transparency piece, because like it's clear from emotion today that I really like that area. Is there going to be kind of like an honest analysis of each of the clubs to really identify certain pockets that seem to be cultivating it? Picking a random example, let's say it was found that there's a lot of gender-based violence in sports. I'm not suggesting calling out a single sports team, for example, just to prevent some of the players who don't participate in that culture, but just ensuring that students kind of get like an honest understanding of where the violence is coming from and then where we can take steps to repair it. Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, no, 100%. So I guess to start out to your point, I think that you brought up a really great point there in terms of the varsity space. I know last year, Councillor Mendez put a motion forward regarding, discussing the anti-sexual and gender-based violence training of students. I think it was, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, executive team, but I believe it was students of sports teams and members of sports teams that were supposed to receive anti-sexual and gender-based violence training. We weren't specifically exploring the club's avenue, but I don't think that's something that's off base by any means. I think we could definitely, sit down with our Vice President Governance and Finance and Vice President Katadia and discuss that further in terms of the outcome. And I'm happy and open to a friendly amendment if that's something that you'd like to put forward. But it wasn't something that was originally on our radar, I'll be honest.
No, thanks. I really appreciate the transparency and I like the flexible approach. So I think I'll save this speech for like the debate portion. So yeah.
No problem.
Sounds good. And Councilor Bismarck.
Hi. I just wanted to raise a point and ask, since I was worried about typical outreach that the USC has achieved with students that actually hear about like advocacy we do, including this advocacy. And as such, I was wondering if this working group plans to collaborate with student organizations independent of the USC, such as Western's One Love chapter, especially since it's seen particular success with Western's Greek culture community.
So it's my current understanding that the USC doesn't have any direct connection to One Love, as it's my understanding that it is not a USC supported club. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vice President Governance and Finance. That being said, I don't think that there is an opportunity for collaboration in terms of consulting feedback from other groups on campus. So for example, one that really directly comes to light from myself is soft teams. I think, oftentimes softs and head softs specifically have a lot of insight into where the policy is not working for students. And another avenue we can also explore, because first year students are generally the most vulnerable to sexual violence and sexual assault, is residence councils. It's something that I've experienced in, and again, it's a place where you do see a lot of those conversations happen regarding the fact that students don't feel that they have the support. Again, I don't think we're like closed-minded to a potential like One Love consult or conversation, but as it's not directly USC affiliated, it wasn't something that I had originally flagged.
All right, super.
All right. So to go to the next question from Councilor Chen.
Thank you, Nika, and thank you, Councillor Thompson. You all spoke very well on it. I'm just wondering, because there are a lot of intersectional impacts when it comes to gender-based violence, especially for minorities and for the LGBTQ2+ community. I'm wondering what steps and outreach that you would like to take to engage the students and to see their voice being represented on this one. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, would you like to take that question, or would you like myself to?
More than welcome to continue, Nika.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I think, again, Ethan, you bring up a great point there in terms of anti-sexual and gender-based violence approaches should be intersectional. It's something that's incredibly important, as it's something that's experienced very differently depending on your sexual identity. And experienced at different rates. So I think, something that we'd love to do is sit down with other peer programs such as the Allyship Network and Ethno USC, and really look to gather more student feedback from different groups on campus to ensure that any approach that we are taking is intersectional and that we have an idea of how students from different identities are experiencing the policy and where they feel we're currently falling short. It's definitely something that's on our radar, and it's something that's very critical to me.
Sounds good. And up to Councilor Poirier.
So I just kind of have a follow-up question, kind of coming off of Councilor Bisnorm and Councilor Dusick. So I wanted to know if there was any current plans to directly talk to the Greek-like organizations. I know that they're not directly associated with the USC, but obviously they play a huge role in gender-based violence. So just kind of wanted to know about that.
Yeah, sorry, just responding to Ethan in the chat. Definitely something that's, again, on our radar. If you look at that Safe Cities report that I mentioned, I believe Greek life is actually specifically mentioned certain locations. So it's definitely something that is a concern and is well noted. I think, again, that consultation piece is important. And it's also something that we need to critically evaluate in terms of how we're approaching conversations around ASGBV, and the fact that, currently it's something that's really, I feel like, only talked about during a week, and really brought to our students during a week. And it's really brought to our students also in a very non-intersectional approach. It's a very, I won't get into it. If you'd like to have that conversation with me on the side, feel free to shoot me a message. But it's just, I think it could be done in a much better approach, and that aims to, direct Western culture away from being toxic and having, very, rape culture centric conversations around ASGBV, and instead, branching it out to be a more holistic conversation. So that's definitely something that's important to us. And I'll also flag, Emily, that we won't be exploring the different policies on the different affiliate campuses, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a conversation with our affiliate students as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And our final question for this motion from Councilor Clark.
Hello, me again. Yeah, so I actually just have two questions. The first is, and I totally understand if this kind of hasn't been thought out because there's a number of ways to approach this, but how does the working group, at least so far in motion, plan to distribute the resource guide to students? Like, will it just be available kind of on the website where you would go to make a complaint initially? Will it be like emailed? Is it kind of like, is it something we can incorporate with residence dons and floor meetings? That's my first question.
I think that I'll speak tentatively because obviously it's a little bit early for us to say like this is exactly how you're going to be able to see it. But in mind of how Nika and I've discussed the resource guide in preparations of bringing this motion to you, is like I've personally envisioned like an OWL page, for example, something that is readily accessible to students, that is in a central location, also on a platform that we're very, very comfortable using because you use that page so frequently anyways. And I personally think that creating a space like an OWL page that's under like a USC name that says, hi, like we're not replacing anything, rather than we're just like providing access, then the aim then is to be something that is more cohesive, and hopefully also it can be developed in a way that is really, really cognizant of accessibility issues as well. And it's not, rather than stopping you from accessing, for example, the reporting page, it's giving you really quick, immediate, easy access in a really familiar setting.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great idea. And considering, there were conversations going about doing an OWL page potentially for mental health. Those resources are like applicable to ASGBV as well. So having those potentially combined is a really good idea. So I really like that. My second question is actually kind of what you touched on in the earlier answer, Nika, was how kind of during orientation week is one of the only times where there's concentrated education with regards to consent training for a large group of students. And so I guess as a concern of this working group, also exploring how we can continue to educate students past first year and kind of reinforce those habits and those lessons that, are more survivor-centric culture at Western, and moving away, like you said, from education and lessons that aren't potentially as clear as and concise as and effective as they could be.
Yeah, I guess I can touch on that. Sorry, Kevin, am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Sorry, you unmuted, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, just to speak on that a little bit, Emily, Sarah, oh my God, my brain. Anyway, just to speak on that a little bit, I think that, again, going back to what we mentioned regarding clubs and what Councillor Dusick actually mentioned, I think is a really good point. I know last year and within my consultations regarding my campaign, I heard a lot from club leaders that they felt they, needed more support in terms of, BIPOC supporting students training. And I think that maybe we need to open the conversation up to clubs and club executives having training regarding anti-sexual and gender-based violence and, being aware of how they can combat culture and rape culture within their clubs if that's something that they're finding is coming up. So, equipping club leaders and other student leaders with that knowledge is definitely something we're open to, and I think could be a very important way to carry the conversation from OWEEK to kind of continue throughout careers, because I really do see student leaders and club leaders and counselors as like obviously the leaders on campus, but as people that set the tone. So yeah, I hope that kind of clarifies.
It does. Thank you so much.
All right, seems like there aren't any other hands for questions, so we'll be moving on to the debate period. So anyone with hands? All right, Councillor Dusick.
Thanks. So this is kind of going back to me and Nika's conversation in the question period, just about proposing an amendment, just to specifically include language in the motion about consulting with the USC ratified clubs and also organizations outside of that scope, and not specifically saying a concrete statement of we will consult these specific groups, because COVID makes reaching out to people quite difficult right now, and I don't think it's necessary to put specifics, but just including a statement in there. Perhaps it's another be it resolved statement, another whereas statement. I've never had to make an amendment before, so I'm not sure the exact correct area it should go. But having a statement in there about consulting with the different USC clubs and organizations outside of that, like Greek Life, as another counselor mentioned, I think is super, super important. And just as an addendum to that, I know that there's probably a lot of clubs on campus that might get their backs up or get a little bit nervous about a group, like a working group like this, investigating their sexual assault culture, because it's quite a touchy subject in a lot of groups, especially ones like Greek Life, who have a stereotype, unfortunately, of promoting that behavior. So including the statement that consultation with them will occur, I think is a good thing, just ensuring that it's a respectful conversation with them that's being mindful of the culture they're trying to create, that's an inclusive one. So if somebody on council who's perhaps more knowledgeable about me on where this would maybe fit best, or even like Nika or Ava, if you want to speak about where you think it would best fit, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I'm happy to have it under the terms of reference if we're able to. I believe we should be able to, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but if I can add and amend those and we vote on that under our mandate. What I'm thinking, Maddie, is that we keep the consultation wording broad enough that it allows us at a later date, if we feel like there's other, members of the Western community and even the London community that we'd like to consult, but maybe aren't specifically written in terms, to, allow us to have a little bit more scope if necessary.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so if we're doing an amendment for that, correct me if I'm wrong. So does anyone want to be a mover for this amendment then?
Can I move my own amendment, or is that not allowed?
No, absolutely, you should move your own amendment.
Yeah, you can.
I'm gonna move it.
Any second? All right, any
Can I
seconder?
work?
All right, sounds good. Would any of you like to speak upon it?
I think I kind of beat it into the ground before. I don't think you guys need to hear me talk about it anymore, but.
All right.
I'll just add, I think something we've been trying to do consistently with ASJBV here is to really write into the terms of reference and into the motion accountability for what we're promising to do. So I think this is an important amendment to be adding to kind of continue on that tangent and also really recognize things that are being brought to our attention on the council floor as well.
Sure, for sure. Any questions from anyone? Any debating points?
I think President Fakarani may have his hand up.
Oh, is that hand up? Okay, I apologize. So that hands up. I saw that hand up from previously before the amendment, so I thought it was for the motion. But please go ahead.
No, that's totally okay. And it's honestly a comment. So if it's out of line, just let me know. But I do want to clarify for everyone here that in terms of our clubs, we have a club's governance committee that enforces and oversees all of the policies and procedures of our club system. And we also do specifically have a club's hearing and sanctions procedure that's available on our club's website that might shed some light on how we specifically address gender-based violence in the club system. But I just want everyone to at least be aware that there are a lot of these policies and procedures already in place in our club system specifically to support survivors. And it just might be helpful information and context for everyone to have.
Councilor Dusek, is that something you'd like to say during the debate portion?
No, you know what? I think it's definitely a great point. It's really a good thing to hear that the club system already kind of has like a pre-worked in methodology of how they go through like dealing with sexual assault and gender-based violence, as each club is kind of unique and different. No, I think it's definitely a great thing, and just adding in like this amendment here kind of works with the work that the USC is already doing, just to ensure that the working group is kind of like following in stride with what the USC has already tried to do. So thanks, Zamir, for bringing that up.
That's good. All right. Any other points for the debate portion? All right, so we'll now just move into the voting period. So just same idea. So thumbs up for yes, and no for no, and yes for yes, no for no, and thumbs up for abstain. Sorry. All right, so it seems like everyone is voting for yes, so the ayes have it. All right, so we'll now move back to the original motion. So does anyone have anything else they'd like to add for the motion number 9? Okay, seems like no one does, so we'll move on to the voting period for motion number 9. So check out Turning Point.
While you're all voting, I'm just going to add, because I've had this question come up a couple of times now, where people have had trouble with Turning Point and messaged me their vote. If you are not able to vote on Turning Point for whatever reason, I need you to email me your vote. I need an email trail so that it doesn't just look like I'm altering votes willy-nilly. I need to have some backup that this was a request. I also don't want to lose things in the Zoom chat. So email is best for me if you can do that, please. But hopefully you're all able to vote okay. I'm waiting on 3 more votes.
For sure.
Still 2 more votes. I'm going to close the polls in polls are closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Right. Whoever's dog barks seemed to be quite happy it passed too.
That's
but
mine.
anyways, so now we'll move on to motion number 9, 10, second last one. So motion to oppose forms of discrimination, harassment, abuse, and inspire USC-led action. So it's been moved once again by President Takarani. Do I have a seconder?
Councilor Mahakal, I can second it.
Sounds good. All right, do either of you have anything that you'd like to share?
I would like to, yes, please. I just want to start off for a question for Melissa. I'm noticing that the be it resolved clauses here are the ones from motion 7, but the ones that the University Affairs Standing Committee that was originally associated with the motion are these ones I'm sending in the chat right now. And while, wait, actually, I'll just wait for, us to decide how we're going to move forward before I talk more.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I will. So what I'm going to do is make sure the amendments go into the agenda. Again, if you're following along on the agenda, you'll see where these are. I'll put them in red so that they're really easy to notice.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so basically, we have a community standards policy that identifies the types of behavior that we at the USC deem appropriate and address in the instance that a counselor, a member of our CIA team, so coordinators, interns, or associate team kind of violates. However, we don't have a general stance on how we feel about these types of discrimination, especially when it happens in the community or when it happens to our student body and doesn't involve a member of the USC. So essentially all we're trying to do here is to create a stance and say that we do stand against all these types of hatred, so that if and when another act of hate happens in London, the executive council is able to make a stance without having to call an emergency meeting of council. And that means that we're just able to reply and provide supports to students in a more timely manner. So that's the first thing that this motion would do. Second of all, it would task the USC executive with creating our first ever racialized and religious students policy paper. We want to make sure that whatever we're advocating for is data-driven and informed by genuine student desires. And so having this policy paper would really, really help guide our advocacy. And then last but not least, it would endorse the recommendations included in the final report of the President's Anti-Racism Working Group. Again, this is helpful because then when we're advocating for it to the university, we're able to say this is not just something that I, as Zamir, the USC president, endorse, or something that Ziana, our VPUA, endorses. It's something that our entire council stands behind and would like to see come into fruition. It just makes our lobbying voice that much stronger. So that's what this motion essentially would inspire us to do or create or provide the momentum for, depending on whichever be it resolved clause you're looking at. That's what I had to say to the motion. And also, Melissa, just looking at
There's an S missing and identifies. I fixed it in the agenda.
Oh, I was just gonna say these two be it resolved clauses here that I've highlighted, those are the ones from motion 7. So they don't have to be in this motion. We just be repeating otherwise.
So highlighting where?
The two be it resolved clauses that are in black in the motion in the agenda.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's motion 7. We don't need, no, that's totally okay. So yeah, we have the be it resolved that we oppose, we have be it resolved the working group, and we have be it resolved. Yeah, okay, perfect. This is perfect. What did I do? That was the wrong button. Sorry.
No worries. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're moving into the question period for this. So any questions? All right. President Mohan.
I think we all agree with the spirit of this motion. I just have a very technical question. So the first be it resolved statement, the language is the USC opposes such forms of violence and discrimination. So are we to mean that we oppose all these forms of discrimination in the last whereas clause within the London and Western community, or are we not having a geographic scope on our opposition to such forms of violence and discrimination? And I ask that because I think there's an implication to be made about what is the scope of our advocacy when talking about these issues.
Yeah, so we were hoping to keep this local to the London and Western community. That's not to say that we can't comment on things that happen outside, but then I would recommend that in those instances, we come to council and council is able to make a decision instead of the executive council. Yeah. So maybe we should amend that line. Do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, we can do an amendment in the debate portion if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that and we will reflect in the meanwhile.
Sounds good. All right. Doesn't seem like there are any other questions, so we'll move on to the debate portion. All right, Councilor Adnan.
Yeah, so while you guys, reflect on the other amendment, I also have an amendment that I want to propose. And I literally brought this up before, but could we include socioeconomic status as one of the indicators of discrimination? So my amendment would basically be like right after family status, just add like socioeconomic status and then disability.
Okay. Oh,
Well, just really briefly, the reason we wouldn't be able to do that is because that is not identified in the Human Rights Code, but you can certainly add another whereas statement.
Oh, okay. I'm not really familiar with the wording of the whereas statement, so if somebody else would like to, you know, like figure out like the exact wording for that.
Yes. You could say, whereas the University Students' Council also believes that every person has a right to equal treatment without discrimination on the basis of socioeconomic status.
Shall we do that for the amendment then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone like to move for that?
I can move it.
All right, cool. And seconder?
Councillor Clark.
Oh, go ahead. Sarah, you got it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Sounds good. Any questions? All right, would you guys like to speak upon the amendment? The mover and seconder.
I think I already spoke about it before, or like a very similar amendment before.
I just echo what was said.
All right, sounds good. And any questions for this amendment?
I have a comment. From what I understood, we wanted to talk about socioeconomic status and disability, but in the motion, there was no talk of disability. So if we can add that on.
The last word in the first whereas statement.
Okay. Okay. I guess I just didn't see it. I just wanted to make sure that that was accounted for.
And thank you for checking in. No, I appreciate that.
Any questions? Any further questions? Right. Anything for debate period? All right. We'll now move on to voting for this amendment. Same process as before for the reactions. Seems like everyone's been voting yes, so the ayes have it. So we'll now move on to back to motion number 10, debate period. All right, Councilor Miller.
I have a clerical amendment. There's a typo in the motion that I wanted to get corrected. Sorry. Which is in the third whereas clause, the last word, it says anti-Semitism instead of anti-Semitism. Also, anti-Semitism preferred usage does not have a dash. So I guess proposing to change it to anti-Semitism, one word.
All right. Melissa, do we need to go through the whole process if it's just a grammar
No,
correction?
for a clerical amendment, I can just fix it.
All right, cool. All right, we fixed it. All right, so President Faccarati.
So I just want a motion to amend the first be it resolved clause to say, be it resolved that the USC opposes such forms of violence and discrimination as they manifest in the London community.
All right, who likes to move for that?
I can move it.
All right, any seconder?
Also, I can second.
All right, anything that you like to contribute?
Nope, I think it was spoken to well.
All right, I'll assume the same for President Faccarati. So any questions? All right, debate. Oh, is that a question, Councilor Chen?
Yeah, this is also like a clerical thing, but like identify is spelled wrong in the first sentence. I don't know if you caught that.
So what we're learning is I don't know how to type.
No worries.
So
no worries.
I've already caught it on the agenda because Shanika very kindly messaged me as well.
Yeah. All right. Other than that question, are there anything else for questions? All right, we'll move on to the debate portion. Any debaters? All right, we'll move to voting for this now. So please make your vote. All right, I only see like 7 yeses, but if anyone else hasn't voted, please do so now. All right, it seems like there's more numbers, so I'll assume that the ayes have it. So now moving back to the motion once again in the debate portion. Any other points? All right, President Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. It seems like there's an interest from Council to look at the issues of racialized and religious students from an intersectional lens. I imagine that's implicit in a policy paper to address the interests of these students, but I thought it might be a helpful amendment, not that I can move it, to include that.
So moving it, so anyone second it?
I can second it.
All right, cool. Any questions? Or would you like to speak upon that before the questions?
Sorry, who moved it?
The President Mohan.
He's not able to move it.
Oh, you're
because
not
he's
voting, that's right. That's right. So
I
who'd like to
can
move?
move it instead.
All right, sounds good.
The only thing I would add is, yeah, like we're going to make sure that it was intersectional in the first place. And we've also already been working with Lisa and Bertha, the two anti-racism advisors, to understand how they went about their process and their report, and are using some best practices from them when we're going about doing ours. But more than happy to have that reflected in the wording as well. More accountability, I love it.
All right, any questions for this? All right, any points for debate? All right, let's now move on to the voting for this motion's amendment. All right, so it seems like everyone's been voting yes, so the ayes have it for this amendment. So going back to motion number 10, the debate portion, any other additional hands? All right, so we'll now move on to the voting period for this one then. So check out Turning Point and we'll see and vote for that. Melissa, how's the voting going, by the way?
Waiting for 8 more people.
Sounds good.
Still waiting for 3 more. The motion passes unanimously.
Sounds good. All right, the final motion for today, motion number 11, and that is be it resolved that council endorse the collection of data on students' attitudes, beliefs, and experiences relating to sexual and gender-based violence. Moved by President Faccarani. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Jarman?
Sounds good. Do either of you want to speak about it?
Yes, please. And we're getting to the tail end, council. So again, I apologize for how much I'm talking. But essentially, well, if you were on the Social Science Students Council or just generally have hung out with me, you know I don't stop talking about the survey. But basically, in 2019, the provincial government released the result of the Student Voices on Sexual Violence survey. That was a survey that was conducted, if I'm not mistaken, late 2017, early 2018, to gather information on how students perceive, understand, and respond to sexual violence. It also gathered information on students' level of satisfaction with their university or college's sexual violence supports and services, if they have experienced some form of sexual violence during their time at university or college. There were over 700,000 respondents, and the results of the survey were very, very helpful for us at the USC in order to get a sense of just how pervasive the problem is at Western. We actually had the worst rates of any university in Ontario, which is horrific. And I know Nika spoke about it a little bit in her motion, so I won't stress this too much. But the survey was conducted, as I mentioned, or administered by the provincial government in 2018. Since then, it has not been reinstated. And we kind of, as an executive, would really like to see it reinstated because now we have a benchmark and we'd like to see how things have progressed and if things have changed. And also, it's helpful to be getting some of this data from a third party because of the biases that would exist if the survey was run by either the USC or Western or affiliates or so forth. That's a little bit of context. If anyone would like more information, feel free to hit me up or UNICEF. She's also a bit of an expert on the survey, but we'd love council to be able to endorse the survey to be reinstated so that UNICEF can head to our provincial stakeholders and say, this is what the students want, let's do it.
That's good. Does President German have anything?
No, I think President Becker said it all.
All right, thank you. All right, any questions? All right, President Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the context that Zamir provided was really helpful because in like the pure reading of the motion, it's unsure how what we're endorsing. So I read it for the first time. I thought, oh, the university should collect this data, or perhaps we should collect this data. I'm not sure if we want to make that be resolved a little bit more clear that we do want to reinstate the SVSV climate survey, or if we want to keep it open, perhaps even on the provincial level. I'm not really sure, but one thing that stood out to me.
I totally agree with you. There's a bit of a partisan issue, which would make it a lot easier for us to advocate for if we don't call it student voice on sexual violence. So I'm more than happy to propose an amendment during debate period to say endorse the collection of data on students' attitude, blah, 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 by the provincial government.
All right, next question from President Bajaj.
I think my question was already answered by Councillor Mohan, but just a point of clarification. So in terms of this collection of the data, it'll be completely separate from any internal data that that Western is collecting regarding reporting avenues, correctly? Because it's correct, because it's my understanding right now that only campus police's data on Western sexual violence and assault are published.
Okay, so first of all, yes, this would be independent of the university. The challenge with gathering data on gender-based violence at the university is that it comes from so many different sources and it's published by so many different sources. So case management also has their own statistics that they publish. We don't get housings data. If students report to their faculties, that often is not included. So it's just a matter of there are so many ways to report and nothing is centralized that even if we were to collect the police's data, it would be, campus special constable services data, it would be severely underrepresented.
All right, Councilor Torre. I think you're muted if you're trying to ask a question. Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
No worries.
So I kind of have two questions. I don't know if I can ask them both in one shot.
It seems like no one else has their hand up for now, but someone else raised up their hand. I'll go for them and then I'll come back to you for a second question.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess my first question is this something that's currently being debated or currently being talked about by members of by members of Queen's Park, or is this something that's kind of we want to bring forward, whether by USA or by the USC?
Yes, so to your first question, it is currently not. Again, it was a bit of a partisan issue, and so we're trying to reframe it in a way that's appealing to the sitting government. And I will defer to Eunice to provide a little bit more context.
Yeah, and kind of in sorry, I'm like figuring out my audio. As we were figuring out our strategic priorities for USA, also a really big point was our new minister who just got appointed has done a lot of work previously on sexual and gender-based violence. So this is something that we like also want to present because we do see it as like a more likely possibility going into this year with that minister.
Awesome. And so my follow-up is that
Wait, sorry. There's actually another question. Just checking. I saw that someone else did have a question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Councillor Cunningham, did you have a question? Because we did see your hands up. I just forgot to.
It was answered earlier by President Mohan's question.
All right.
Thank you.
No worries. All right. Please go ahead, Councillor Foyer.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess my second question is, would it be possible for the provincial government to mandate that all data collected by the university from these various sources be reported as part of the survey so that they can have a more holistic view of the situation on Western's campus?
I would not recommend that because of double counting. I'm trying to think. What do you think? If they were to mandate that the university share the data with their university, if the university share the data with the provincial government when the provincial government is running SVSV. Yeah, I'll pass it to Eunice.
Yeah, I think the main point with so the provincial government basically ran this survey with COU, like the Council of Ontario Universities. So the main thing is that there is that third party involved. So if the universities were directly reporting this, I think it would kind of take away that third party that kind of verifies the results, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right, seeing as there are no more hands, we'll go to debate. There seems to not be any other hands for the debate section unless, President Bajaj.
Yeah, I'll just quickly speak in favor of this motion. I know that I've talked pretty extensively about ASGBV earlier in my motion, but I'd like to say that it is data like this and surveys like this that allow us to then, have a standing point and a point going forward within the USC, within the university to address ASGBV on campus. So I think it is really important that we have this data and that we are endorsing the collection of it.
Sounds good. And President Francarani.
Hi, I'm good to make a motion to amend correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, perfect. I'll just send the messaging in the chat. I just want to add to the final be it resolved or the only be it resolved statement to say by the provincial government or a provincial agency. So like Eunice kind of mentioned, when there was that transition of power, the provincial government no longer wanted to publish the data on their own. So they sent the data off to the COU, the Council of Universities, which represents all the university presidents. And the COU is actually the body that released the data. So if we do run into the instance that the provincial government doesn't want to run or administer the survey, at least in our motion, we can also say that, okay, can you do it COU?
Got it. And would you like to be your own mover or would you like?
Yeah, I can be the mover. Thank you.
And who'd like the second?
Councillor Bajaj.
Oh, I'll go with Councillor Bajaj, if that's all right. Yeah, do either of you have anything to say about this amendment?
No, I think President Fakarani covered it all.
Sounds good. All right, any questions about this? Any debate? All right, let's go to voting for this. So just please click on the reactions. Right, seems like everyone's been voting yes, so the ayes have it. So we'll go back to this debate, the debate portion for motion 11. Anyone else like to make anything for this? All right, sounds good. So we'll now move on to the voting for motion number 11. So check out turning point.
Looks like I'm waiting on 5 more people.
Sounds good.
Okay, 3 more people. I'm gonna close the vote in 3, 2, 1. And the motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Alrighty, so that's the end for action and all the motions. So well done, everyone. So now we'll go back to the next section on the agenda, which is for information. So the first up, we have the Board of Directors Chairperson report.
Hi, everyone. Kevin, is it okay if I do my report in 2 halves? So I'll do my first bit, pause for questions, which no one ever has any questions for me, and then do a second bit after.
Yeah, for sure, that'd be helpful for everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to start off by letting you all know that yesterday I did a little bit of a presentation about the board to the summer council training. It's recorded and online for anyone who missed it. I'd encourage you all to watch it because I'm just a great presenter and I'm sure you'll love it. And I don't know, I feel like at this point we've all run out of stuff to watch on Netflix, so it'll be fun. Yeah, in terms of what the board has been up to lately, we elected our vice chair this past cycle. So congratulations to Pensy Liang, who is our wonderful vice chair. She is a first-year director. She was just ratified by you all in March. She's a second-year student in PPE, which I still don't know what it stands for, and I've asked her a few times and I keep forgetting. And she's a finance analyst this summer at Cadillac Fairview. So super smart, super well qualified. We are very, very lucky to have her as vice chair. So just for some context on what the vice chair does, they basically step in if I can't do anything. So, you know, one day if I am, yes, maybe it stands for personal protective equipment. I really don't know. But yeah, one day if you see Pensy here, it means, I don't know, I've gone to space with Jeff Bezos or something and I'm not able to attend. In terms of what our committees have been up to, Finance Committee accepted the April 2021 financial statements. We are in a wonderful cash position, thanks to our incredible executive and our finance team at the USC. A few notable things: there was a very large variance in accounts payable this year, this cycle, but that was just due to a clerical error, which has now been corrected for. And we are expected to reach a surplus at the end of the fiscal year. So I don't know if I said physical, but I meant fiscal. HR committee, we received an update on the EDI consulting that's going on with CCDI. Everything is going well, and we're actually under budget a little bit right now, which is exciting. We also discussed the possibility of having a director sit in on the selection panels for 2 of the VP positions. So VP Comms and Public Affairs and VP Student Support and Programming. This is something that was brought to us by USC staff after realizing that the student at large positions on those selection panels weren't necessarily working as they had been intended to work. So for some context, the student at large was supposed to be an impartial voice that was unbiased. But the issue was that there was a lack of accountability. So people really just didn't know what was going on. They were missing some key context. Also, I should have asked if any of you were the student at larges on these. And if you are, I'm sorry for insulting you, but this isn't coming from me. But the idea that was brought forward to the board was that we would have a director fill in instead of a student at large. The directors are all independent. We are not, you know, politically active in student politics at the USC. So it serves essentially the same purpose as the student at large position would, but we have a little bit more accountability because we as directors are accountable not only among ourselves, but also to you as the members of our corporation who are able to fire us or discipline us as you see fit. Other thing we did at HR committee this cycle was accepting the COO performance appraisal. So that's the PA for our chief operating officer. Once again, stellar results for Jeff Armour. He is a real asset to the corporation. He is someone we really would like to retain long term. For context, Jeff is, I keep saying for context, I'm sorry. Jeff is the board's sole employee, so we're responsible for the hiring of the COO and the salary, compensation, et cetera, of the COO. And yeah, we have no concerns about Jeff's performance whatsoever. Finally, governance committee, my favorite committee of the board. I'm not biased at all. We received an update from the ongoing review of the advertising materials policy of the corporation. That's just waiting on a complementary policy from the university, which is undergoing review. We also updated and amended the board community standards policy. So this is the policy that sets out, well, community standards for the corporation. And it was a pretty heavy change that we did. We scaled back the policy so that it was just a few statements of, you know, we are an inclusive community. We think that we should have a community standards procedure in place. And then the board sort of shifted authority over the community standards procedure to the executive council, because that would be nitty-gritty decisions, and that's not what the board does. We focus solely on oversight and in this case, managing risk. And we also received an update from the USC's legal counsel, so that's John McNair at Mackenzie Lake Lawyers, about what the updated role of the USC board is going to be in elections going forward. So this was brought to us not only by our legal counsel, but by the outgoing chief returning officer. I think that's what CRO stands for, and the new / incoming CRO and DRO. They basically said that the board hasn't actually been fulfilling its role as prescribed by the policies. So going forward, there's not going to be any amendments to bylaws, no new policies or procedures that are being enacted. But what's going to happen is we're just going to serve as a resource for the CRO. So I have here the language that they were using. The board will be empowering the Elections Governance Committee to perform its functions by ensuring, among other things, that the EGC has sufficient resources, serving as a resource for the CRO, providing guidance on how or where to find help resolving novel or ambiguous elections issues, especially those involving a potential conflict of interest, and will also be reactive, not proactive, and provide advice only when explicitly requested by the CRO. So some directors had concerns about this being us getting too into the political side of the USC. Again, we are not a political body. We are completely independent and focus only on the corporation. But we were assured by our legal counsel that this wouldn't amount to us being political. It would allow us to retain our independence, and we'd mainly focus on ensuring the other independent bodies like the CRO and the EGC have enough resources to do what they need to do. So we would never have to get involved in an election. I'm gonna pause there if you have any questions for me. I know no one ever does. It breaks my heart every time, but this is a good stopping point because the next thing I'm going to talk about is a little different.
All right, President Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. So, Rule, you mentioned like the proposal or idea to replace students at large with directors for the appointments of VP Communications and VP SSP. Like, is that expected? Is the plan that we would like to change that for 2022, 2023 executive? What does that look like moving forward if we'd like to pursue that?
Yeah, so that from my understanding, this was brought to us by staff. It would be for the upcoming hiring cycle. And in terms of exactly how this would happen, I believe, and I'm not sure, that this is set out, but like this is governed by council. So you would actually have a role in doing this. This was just a conversation at the board about whether or not we felt it was proper for a director to sit on those panels. And we didn't see any issue with it. We're being independent on these panels. We already sit on the VPGF selection panel. We have a director who sits on that. So I'm sure Nathan or Zamir could talk to this more, but I think in terms of the process we'll follow, it will most likely come through you.
I can really briefly add if that's okay, Kevin.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to provide a little bit of historical context. The individual the student representative on these hiring panels has historically been a member from the board. It was in what was Bardia's year? So it was 2 years ago that they made the change to make it a student at large, in order to just make sure that more student voices were at the table. What we found, and I can actually speak to this as someone who hired 3 VPs this year, we faced a lot of challenges having students at large on the panels. Specifically, accountability is a huge issue, where if they're not following USC policies and procedures, we aren't actually able to move them in the right direction. But further to that, students at large don't always have a really holistic understanding of the intricacies of the USC and the executive portfolios. And so I'm not 100% confident. I'm still working with Carla, our senior manager of people and development, to figure out if this needs to come to council, if it's something that would actually just be done through the bureaucracy, but we'll keep you all updated. But that's just some additional context.
Sounds good. Any other questions for? Okay, it doesn't seem like, so you can please proceed.
Okay, sounds good. So the last thing I wanted to talk about today is a potential conflict of interest, which has arisen with respect to me specifically. So on top of my role as a director and chair of the board, I also recently was elected to serve as the president of the Student Legal Society, which is Law's constituency council of the USC. That would, by USC policy, entitle me to a voting seat on council. But according to the Student Legal Society, the SLS constitution, that is delegated to the VP external of our organization. Voting counselors can't serve on the board, and directors can't serve as voting counselors. Those are two positions which are mutually exclusive. And so in order to resolve this conflict, what has happened is Law has appointed 2 different counselors. So I am not one of the counselors representing the law faculty. And the Student Legal Society has passed a motion which would bar me from ever voting in a USC meeting. So what would happen if I tried to vote is I would immediately be stripped of the SLS presidency. So I would not be a president of a constituent council and then would not be able to vote at all. If I try to vote, the speaker, Kevin, is supposed to gavel me down as per this SLS resolution, which was sent to him after it was passed, I think a few months ago. And notice would be provided to the Student Legal Society that I have been axed as president. And the reason we did this, it's a little bit extreme, is just to make sure that there is no perception whatsoever of any conflict of interest. I can never vote on a motion at council. So we are quite confident that we've avoided any conflict at all. But if you have any questions, comments, I'm happy to take them now.
Any questions? There doesn't seem to be any, so thanks a lot for your report.
All right, sounds good.
All right, next one is the Governance and Finance Standing Committee report. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share for that?
Yeah, I guess really quickly, I'm going to keep this really short so we can get on with our Sundays. But at our last Governance and Finance Standing Committee, we elected our vice chair, which is Councillor Bisworm, which is very exciting. We also elected our secretary, which was Councillor Jarman, which is also very exciting. Other than that, you saw the motions that we brought forward and voted on them, and they passed, which is also very exciting. So other than that, not too much. And we look forward to our next one.
Thanks a lot. And the External Advocacy Standing Committee report, anyone like to share for that?
Oh, I guess I also sat as a proxy on that one.
Yeah, I guess you could.
Yeah.
You could
so
talk about it.
Also for external affairs, very similarly, we elected our vice chair and our secretary. Super exciting. And then passed our motions that came forward to council, which passed here today. So yeah.
Sounds good. Excellent. All right. And University Affairs Standing Committee report.
Yeah, pretty much similar to the other 2 standing committees. Most of the motions that were put forward, actually all of the motions that were put forward, you saw here today in their amended form. So if you have any questions about those, please just let me know. We elected a vice chair, Councillor Magdar, and a secretary, Councillor Beltran. So thank you to both of those individuals for putting their names forward and being involved. And yeah, throughout the year, if you want to attend a UA standing committee meeting, I really encourage you to. It's really nice to see new faces there whenever possible. And we're looking at, obviously once everyone's finalized their schedules, having a set in stone time each month. So that way it makes it a little bit easier for everyone to attend and plan ahead. So yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, cool.
Is it possible, sorry, 1 second. Is it possible if I could just add into the external standing committee sort of
yeah, please go ahead.
Sort of the summary. Just to tell you guys like who our vice chair is. Our vice chair is Councillor Clark and our secretary is Councillor Zhu, both from social science. And I thought I'd just like shout them out there. That's literally all I had to add.
Yeah, no worries. Alrighty, with that ends for information. So now we move into for discussion of the agenda. Is there anything that you guys like to discuss? No? Okay, I see a shake from President Cool. All right, anything for new business? Okay, normally there isn't anything for new business. But all right, now we come to termination. So great meeting everyone, but let's have our Sunday back. Let's take back control of our Sunday. So who'd like to be the mover for this?
Councillor Mahakal, I can move it.
All right, who'd like to second?
Councillor
Chen.
Second.
We're hard on that termination.
Wow, everyone's very passionate. Okay, all right. Normally, Melissa, is there a turning point for this?
You can ask if there are any objections.
All right. Does anyone want to have their Sunday back, or does anyone not want to have their Sunday? Who objects?
I mean, I like you guys, but I'm not going to object. No.
All right. So it seems like no one objects. So have a great rest of your Sunday, and see you guys later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, guys.